Can I ask the Mayor, members and those here with us today to stand for a minute's silence for the victims of Grenfell Tower fire and the attack in Finsbury Park. Thank you. Can I welcome everyone to this session of the London Assembly Mayor's Question Time, being held here at City Hall, London. The meeting is going to have two parts to it, and in the first half, I'm going to call on the Mayor and invite a number of members to say some words regarding the Grenfell Tower fire in the first instance, and then follow that with words regarding the Finsbury Park attack. I will then put to members an urgent motion once I have their agreement, and then we will have an adjournment of minutes. And I would be grateful if the members and the Mayor could stay with us for that time. So can I start by asking the Mayor to say some words about the Grenfell Tower fire?
Thank you, Chair. All of us have been truly devastated by the horrific scenes at Grenfell Tower in Kensington on the 14th of June. My heart goes out to the family and friends of the victims and everyone affected by this fire. Tragically, the police believe at least 79 people have died in the fire and many others are still being treated in hospitals across London. This has left a very tight-knit community in North Kensington absolutely devastated. I want to thank our brave firefighters and emergency services, including NHS staff and the police, who continue to work around the clock in the aftermath of this tragedy. This has been, and still is, a painstaking operation, and they have shown immense courage and professionalism in extremely harrowing circumstances. I've personally offered my thanks and gratitude to the Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, Danny Cotton, firefighters and officers from the ambulance service and the Met Police at the scene, and can only admire and applaud their dedication and pass on to them the gratitude of London. However, I've also witnessed firsthand the justifiable frustration and anger of the local community, and I've spent a lot of time listening to local residents affected. They are understandably distraught, frustrated and angry. I promised that I would fight for them to get the answers and support they deserve. Frankly, the immediate response from the local authority wasn't good enough. Residents were not proactively contacted, there was insufficient support on the ground, and it took too long to get them the resources they need, whether a temporary home or financial assistance. I've been attending the government's task force in response to the tragedy and standing up for what the local community needs. I've received assurances from the government that the support is starting to improve. The first emergency payments have been made to residents of the tower, and the first housing offers have been made so residents can stay in a proper local home while permanent homes are secured by the government. However, the response still needs to be better, faster and communicated more effectively to the local community. I've deployed GLA staff to London councils who are now coordinating matters, and also Team London to the recovery operation to support these efforts. I'm also pushing the government to speed up the check-in of other tower blocks across the country. I've provided officer support from City Hall to speed this up, because no one should go to sleep at night worrying about whether this could happen to them. I'm pleased the government have committed to holding a full, independent public inquiry into the fire at Grenfell Tower, and in light of concerns about safety of other blocks that have been similarly refurbished, I believe this inquiry needs to produce an interim report this summer. Residents need to be reassured that the inquiry will get all the answers they deserve. They should have their legal costs paid for, and any individual or organisation found to be negligent must be prosecuted. As the Mayor of London, I will continue to fight alongside them to ensure to get the support and answers they deserve as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Assembly Member Devonish, the AM for the local constituency, to speak?
Thank you, Assembly Member Arnold, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I can say I agree with virtually every word the Mayor has just said. It's an honour to speak on behalf of my constituents and on behalf of the Conservative group here this morning. The last 8 days have been enormously difficult for North Kensington, and all our thoughts are, of course, with the families and friends who lost loved ones and their homes. People are angry, and those affected have an absolute right to be angry. However, our primary focus has to remain on those individuals who have been most affected, the Grenfell Tower families themselves, their neighbours, and of course our outstanding emergency services. The psychological well-being of all those impacted by the fire over the long term must not be forgotten. Long-term cross-agency care will be essential. We are still in the very early stages of what the London Fire Brigade has reminded us is an unprecedented fire. A huge number of questions must all be answered, and such answers cannot be unreasonably delayed. Continuous communication must be provided. It's the essence of all public services. Our public services are still too, sometimes, often inward-looking. But there is a very serious context here. Our police service have rightly launched a criminal investigation, something we must all remember. Inevitably, in the age of 24-hour news media, there has been an almost unprecedented amount of speculation. Some of it fair comment, but some of it borderline poor taste. To quote the London Fire Brigade briefing note that we were kindly sent, and I quote, "We do not yet know what caused the fire, we do not know where it started, and we do not know why it spread in the way that it did. Investigations have started, but it is too soon to say any more." End of quote. I would be grateful if some in the media would include these words when reporting. Politicians, both national and local, have to be held accountable. But the way a noisy minority have tried to hijack an ongoing vital operation for their own sake is shameful. While the Royal Borough of Kensington-Chelsea has but rightly been criticised, I hope the public inquiry the Prime Minister announced last Friday would include chapter and verse on how London boroughs across London as a whole have come together to support my community. As reported, the wider community has been fantastic, but London Borough officers and councillors have been working around the clock alongside our emergency services and Whitehall civil servants. Local North Kensington children still went to school with the appropriate reassurance. Across the country, housing departments have risen to the challenge to reassure the public and check housing stock. As a local councillor myself, I am very proud of the work that has been done by understated public servants who show their worth at times of crisis and every other day. Chairman Arnold, I'd like to finish with a couple of points for reflection, please. Last week, it was announced that PC Keith Palmer was posthumously awarded the George Medal following the Westminster Palace terrorist attack. Yet again, I am in awe at the bravery of all those who serve us. Finally, a bit of context in these uncertain times. A retired MP said to me, "When the media tries to compare the actions of any politician anywhere in the world with the actions of Her Majesty the Queen, you know the politician is on a hiding to nothing." Mr Mayor, colleagues, God bless Her Majesty, Prince William, our emergency services and the people of North Kensington.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member Devenish, and thank you for drawing members' attention to the legal status. And members have in front of them a copy of the advice that Al-FIFA's legal services has produced for their members, and I thought that it would be useful for all members to have that and have it in front of you. You'll also have it electronically. And I now call upon Assembly Member Twycross, Chair of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to add, on behalf of all members of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority, my deepest sympathy and condolences for all those who've lost their lives, their loved ones and their homes as a result of the Grenfell Tower fire. Our thoughts at this time are with them, their friends, family and neighbours, and with all those in the community in and around Grenfell Tower. This is a national tragedy, not just a London tragedy, and through the investigations, inquests and inquiries of coming months and years, the community will and must get all the answers they need and the changes they are understandably demanding. The Mayor has highlighted the need both for a full inquiry and for answers, and most importantly, action as soon as possible. This Assembly will play its role in delivering for Londoners so that never again, genuinely this time, means never again. As Chair of the Fire Authority, I would like to focus on the remarkable response that has already been mentioned of all the emergency services, but especially that of the London Fire Brigade. I'd like to pay tribute to the leadership of Danny Cotton, Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, and her senior team, who had the courage to exercise their operational discretion in accordance with national operational guidelines and ask firefighters to depart from standard working procedures. A decision one of her fellow chief fire officers described to me earlier this week as a brave decision, but the right one. Danny is a remarkable leader of remarkable people. The Commissioner's decision allowed London's firefighters, on the most dreadful of days and in the most dreadful of circumstances, to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. The death toll is horrifically high, but without that brave decision and the huge bravery of the firefighters who went into Grenfell Tower, the numbers of dead would have been considerably higher. They and we should be proud of what they did, of the work they carried out and the passion with which they tried to save lives, and indeed saved lives. Despite the conditions, their exhaustion and the danger to their own lives, our firefighters went into the tower again and again. There were countless acts of individual and collective bravery on the most difficult of days. They witnessed things and experienced things that were beyond imagination and beyond what anyone could and should expect. I'd like to pay tribute to all Fire Brigade staff, to the Control Centre staff in particular, but to everyone in the organisation who played a part, and so many people did. To the Urban Search and Rescue team and firefighters still on the scene in the recovery stage, and to all those supporting colleagues over the past 10 days and over the next weeks and years. To the London Resilience team, the Salvation Army and the Rapid Relief team. To members of public who brought our firefighters food and water. And a special mention must go to the lady that brought the now famous biryani. Thanks as well to those from other brigades who supported the rescue and recovery, notably Kent and Surrey. And to other neighbouring brigades whose mutual aid agreements supported London Fire Brigade in tackling the unprecedented fire while still maintaining a service to protect London and Londoners. I haven't and won't have the opportunity to thank all those concerned, but I would like to put on record my thanks, all of our thanks today. I've been moved and humbled by what I have heard and seen for myself of their work. I've often said I could never do the job of a firefighter, and Tony Devenish mentioned the word awe, and I'm also more in awe than ever of what they do. I wouldn't normally include thanks on my own account, but exceptionally I would like to thank my own team here at City Hall, the Mayor's office and colleagues, particularly Len Duval, for their support, both professional and personal. This tragedy has affected all of us, but above all we must remember those that involved directly. These events will mark their lives forever. Danny Cotton rightly focused in the media on the fact that firefighters are both heroes and human. Above all else, she focused on the need to consider the welfare of staff, and I'd like particularly to thank the Mayor for his support in raising this concern at the highest level of government. It's really appreciated. We, London and the country, owe the London Fire Brigade, all our firefighters and our emergency services a debt of gratitude for their work, but we also owe them a duty of care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call upon Assembly Member Berry?
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking for the Green Group here, and for both of us, waking up to the Grenfell Tower disaster was completely heartbreaking. All our thoughts are with what people must have gone through and those injured and made homeless. So I want to say today something about the emergency response. The community there have been absolutely amazing. The amount of donations that were piling up there when I went early on, the number of local volunteers coming forwards, it was huge, and it was an instant response from the community. As soon as the fire happened, their first instinct, as so often the case with Londoners, was to rally round and support each other. The emergency services, we cannot be more grateful to. They played their part so bravely. But the official relief response for the community, I think we all agree, has been nothing like it should have been. Local councillors and several of us as AMs are still receiving questions and pleas from the local area for more support, and particularly for more communication with community groups who are continuing to provide pastoral support and relief and aren't yet included in the network of official support. I know the Mayor's office is involved now in the new central command. I'm really glad to hear the comments he made just now, and I know that more staff are coming in by the day, and I do hope this will be sorted out quickly now. This community has suffered so much, and they continue to be traumatised over a wide area. They really deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Whittle?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm sure that many of us have been along to Grenfell Tower. I went this week, and it was in the middle of a boiling hot day, and, you know, faultless blue sky. And then, as you're approaching, you come across this massive black edifice, which almost rises up and is mocked by the blue sky. And it is extraordinarily surreal. It doesn't look quite real, but it's deadly real. And it looks like a funeral pyre. And that is exactly what it is. Now, my fellow Assembly members have said how brilliant the services have been, the emergency services, but Assembly Member Berry there just pointed out as well the community response. I went and looked at the various messages left. What is surprising is that a community can be so devastated and yet show such amazing spirit. And these might seem small things, but actually they go home and they do write. They write on placards, they write letters, and they go and put flowers together. That, to me, is a real triumph of the human spirit. There are still things, though, that need to be done. We are the Assembly, and we can ask questions, and we need to ask questions to get questions answered properly. That's true. But while I was down there, I went into a pub called the Pig and Whistle. I don't know whether you know it, but it's on the west of the tower. And I said, well, look, no, I'm from the London Assembly, but what actually, you know, how can we help, as it were? And the barmaid there, Denise, said, well, look at that. And right by the door, and in fact taking up about 25% of the pub, was just masses and masses of things that people had left. These things weren't just, you know, the clothes, the things they'd got from the shelves or sort of second-hand stuff. They'd gone out and bought stuff. There were packets from Primark and things like this. People had gone out, and it was building up. It was massive. And she said there's no one to distribute it. Now, that's not because people don't want to distribute it, but people are stretched so much. So, just to take that one example, if any of us would like to maybe go down and help and try and clear some of this out and distribute it, then I've got the number and everything here, but I think that that would be a very, very good thing to do, because it is absolutely the very essence of human kindness, which is at the moment just sitting there and needs to be delivered. Anyway, I would just add once and for all, on behalf of David, myself, UKIP Group, this is just the most appalling thing. And I'd say as well to people here that if you haven't been there, do go and just also pay your respects to the site. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you very much. my thoughts are with all those affected by this horrific fire. Many of us woke up last week to this unthinkable disaster in our city unfolding on our television screens. I would like to express my thanks to all the emergency services, including the London Air Ambulance, who played a key role, and they were all involved in this incident and showed such huge bravery. But also the humanity and community shown by so many ordinary Londoners and neighbours, volunteering, helping out with donations and giving their time and support. This tragedy has had an impact not just across the capital, but across the country. It stunned everyone. And I visited on Sunday and felt that sense of frustration, that despair on the streets, raw emotions posted on walls, and the missing signs everywhere you went for children, for pensioners, for couples, alongside this burnt-out shell of a tower, people's homes gone. I would actually like to put on record my thanks to Ealing Council, their staff and their leader, who I met at the local emergency centre alongside civil servants, all trying their best to help those affected by the fire. And of course the local churches, other community groups, and my colleague in Kensington, Councillor Linda Wade, who has been providing information and support to those who've been rehoused in Earl's Court, the area that she represents. But now is not the time to finger point, but it is very clear lessons must be learnt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor, can I ask you to say a few words regarding the Finsbury Park attack?
Thank you, Chair. It's been an extremely difficult few months for our city and for all Londoners. The horrific terrorist attack in Finsbury Park follows the Grenfell Tower fire and the recent attacks on Westminster Bridge and London Bridge, as well as the senseless attack in Manchester. My thoughts and prayers are with the families of the victims and everyone affected by the latest terrible attack. Sadly, one person died at the scene, 9 people have been taken to hospital with injuries, and 2 others have been treated for injuries at the scene. Once again, the police and the emergency services responded quickly and with the utmost professionalism. This was a deliberate attack on innocent Londoners, many of whom were returning from their evening Tarawih Ramadan prayers. We don't yet know the full motivations behind it, but terrorism is terrorism, no matter the target and regardless of the poisonous ideology behind it. There has been a worrying rise in hate crime, including Islamophobic incidents following the attack at London Bridge. In the 7 days before London Bridge, there were 36 Islamophobic incidents, and in the 7 days after, this rose to 108, an increase of 200%. Racist hate crime incidents increased from 311 to 378 incidents, an increase of 21%. These are the incidents reported. Clearly, it's possible some aren't. I want to assure Londoners that the police are taking a zero-tolerance attitude towards hate crime. My message to the victims of hate crime is, please report it. Don't think it's too trivial. Don't think the police won't take it seriously. They will. The Met Police have deployed extra police to keep all Londoners safe, particularly those observing Ramadan. They'll be taking additional measures to protect mosques and stepping up their presence in other areas. Like the terrible attacks in Westminster, London Bridge and in Manchester, the attack in Finsbury Park is an attack on all of us. Our shared values of tolerance, freedom and respect. We must crack down on extremism of all types. And can I just end by saying this? London has been through an incredibly difficult few weeks, but I know Londoners will remain strong and united. I know that we will come through this. We will stay strong and we will never be divided.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assembly Member Arnold as constituency member.
Thank you, Deputy. Can I start by thanking the Mayor for his immediate and continuing direct support to the residents of Finsbury Park. What stands out for me whilst I was there with him was his attendance at prayers at the Muslim Welfare Centre Mosque, and also his attendance at the vigil led by members of the long-standing Finsbury Park Interfaith Forum thank you on behalf of the residents of Finsbury Park. Members, I've had the privilege of representing the people of Finsbury Park for over 25 years, first as a local councillor and then on this assembly. It marks the connecting point of 3 London boroughs, Camden, Islington and Haringey. It is an area that welcomes everyone, and as a result, it's as diverse as it gets, whether we look at ethnicity, class, religion, culture or age. At one time, it was a forgotten area. It was severely deprived, and it was susceptible to radical views. Members, it was so susceptible that you will know, because the records show that Finsbury Park Mosque was taken over by who we now call a known terrorist, Abu Hamza. It was worshippers from that mosque who said, "We will not tolerate this because Islam is a peaceful faith." And they went, and beyond the bridge, some 400 yards away, they found a shop with a garage, with space behind it, and working with the community, working with councillors, working with myself and others, they were able to navigate the planning system, they were able to come together, and they now have a wonderful centre. That's the spirit that, if you like, fuels this area. We will not stand for nonsense. We will not be divided. Over the years, it has changed dramatically. Regeneration has helped, but the key success has been the strengthening of community endeavour, of collaboration across boundaries, and most importantly of all, a respect for all. The attack on our community this week will not succeed. There are people who seek to divide us, as we heard from the Mayor, to sow seeds of hate and create a cycle of violence. But this is a place truly where an attack on one is an attack on all. This attack only strengthens our bonds of community. There are people who see the world solely in terms of a religion, but we are part of a wider civic society in which all our differences and similarities must be acknowledged. That must go to strengthen our sense of community. In Finsbury Park, we accept people of all religions and of none. There are also people who seek to make us suspicious, uncertain, and afraid. I'm not afraid. You're not afraid. The residents of Finsbury Park will never be afraid. Remember, and I'll tell this to anyone who thinks they can come into our community and divide us. The community were the first responders. The community were there caring for the injured, waiting for the ambulance. It was a young man who found the bravery when it was necessary to secure the perpetrator. And it was the community and the local imam who said, you know what they said? We will keep him safe for when the police come so that he can face justice. That's all I can say, because, of course, all that is now in the criminal system. Our hearts go out to all those affected by these dreadful events. And like every other speaker this morning, I want to add my thanks to our police services, to our ambulance and hospital staff. Their rapid response has saved lives. Their endeavours, using their professional skills, will be helping people who will need care, surgery. I did burns nursing. It is one of the most demanding services there is, and the patients are some of the most resilient and brave people that you could ever find. I see my colleague, Dr. Sahota, nodding. Our thought will be with them as Many of them go on the journey of recovery. I'll finish by once again thanking the Finsbury Park community for its response, not just on the day, but in the days since, and for all the days to come. I say it again, we will remain united. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Assembly Member Benken.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. It seems a very long time ago since we gathered here for an emergency meeting following the Westminster Bridge terrorist attack, and in my remarks at that meeting I commented that I'm never prouder of the people of my country and of my city than when I witness how we react to adversity. Now, that meeting was only 3 months ago, but there's been so much adversity since that day it feels like far longer. In times of adversity, there will always be those who seek to take advantage from it, and sadly, very depressingly, there have been examples of that on full display very recently. Rage and finger-pointing can be entirely understandable, but they can also lead to division, violence, and destruction. It takes a great deal of strength to resist the temptation to indulge in vengeance, whether righteous or otherwise. And in this, we have recently seen in Finsbury Park examples of humanity at its very worst, but also at its very best. And I'll take the worst first. I'm well aware of the name of the racist idiot who committed the atrocity in Finsbury Park, but I have no intention of honouring him by naming him here. There is no honour, no justification, and no courage required to aim a van at a crowd of unsuspecting pedestrians and mow them down. No higher power is served by striking at the unwary and the defenceless, and there is no legitimation for an action of this kind. It is simple, cold-blooded murder, and perpetrators of such actions do not deserve remembrance. But the actions of this murderous coward also revealed a shining example of humanity at its very best, and I'm referring particularly to the actions of Imam Mohammed Mahmood, who, after the survivors of this attack had caught the perpetrator, intervened to protect him, as the Chair has just said, so that he could be handed over to the police and the due process of law could be followed. Many people might feel that Imam Mahmood and those with him would have had every justification for taking an entirely different course of action under those circumstances, and who among us could really have blamed them if they had? I certainly couldn't. But in the heat of the moment, they chose to resist that temptation and to put their faith in the rule of law. And when asked afterwards why he acted as he did, the Imam is quoted as saying, "This demonisation of the Muslim community at the hands of people with ulterior motives has succeeded to some extent by influencing the vulnerable and the impressionable. We just hope that in times of tragedy, people come together and unite. The fabric of this society is not torn, but we have to continue to keep the fabric of this society intact and to come together." I think that those are words to live by, and I can think of no better sentiment than with which to finish my remarks. We are right to condemn this attack, like the attacks that have gone before it, but the actions and words of Imam Mohammed Mahmood offer great hope for the future, and he and those sentiments deserve to be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you, Assembly Member Arnold. On Monday night, I joined neighbours from all over Highbury and Finsbury Park, standing with Finsbury Park Mosque and Muslim Welfare House to show our solidarity and our support for all those involved in the despicable terrorist attack on Sunday night. Like many people there, I was woken by sirens and helicopters and desperately saddened to hear of the death and injuries caused in this attack on our community. I'm proud of the way that people prevented the attacker from doing further harm, and the Imam for ensuring he was safely handed to the police. I would like to put on record my thanks to the emergency services, to the police, to Islington Council staff, and my fellow Islington councillors, who worked so brilliantly to manage the aftermath of the attack. The informal gathering on Monday outside the mosque included representatives of many faith communities and those of no faith. The diversity described earlier very brilliantly by Assembly Member Arnold of people who were standing there in solidarity is testimony to the incredible work of Mohammed Kosbar, who has done so much to build bridges, not walls, and ensure that Finsbury Park Mosque and Muslim Welfare House are truly part of our community in Islington. I'm proud to live in that borough.
Thank you. Assembly Member Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's been a horrible 3 months for London with the Westminster Bridge attacks and the London Bridge attacks, and went on into Borough Market, and now we have this hideous attack in Finsbury Park as well. And like all of you here, it's a horrible, shocking thing to see Londoners, people who live in London, being the victim of such an awful attack and such an awful crime. In the mind of the person who did this, he probably justified it, but there's no justification for an act which is quite simply an attempted mass murder. And we have to pay tribute to Imam Mahmoud for saving his life, as Assembly Member Bacon said, and handing him over to the police. Of course, we all feel for the people who were attacked, the injuries they have now, and the suffering of their family and friends. And we wish them well, and they're in our thoughts and our prayers. And also, I would like to add, of course, our tribute to the emergency services, the ambulance men and women, the policemen and women who were there to help and to deal with the situation and make sure it didn't get any worse than it is, and to try to clear up and provide comfort to all those who were hurt and injured. We don't want any more of these attacks in our city. There's never any justification. Whatever you believe, whatever differences of belief you have, we have to remember that all these people are human beings. We're all equal. We all have equal value and equal worth. And we must always remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you very much. Another act of terrorism on the streets of London, and this time on our Muslim community. My thoughts are with those involved, their families and friends. And I wish to, like others, thank the emergency services for their swift action, and for those of the local imam from Muslim Welfare House and local people who helped to apprehend the van driver so quickly. We owe them a very special thank you for their dedication, professionalism and bravery. And I would also like to thank the Mayor for his swift and sensitive responses to this and to all of these incidents over recent weeks representing our city and our values. The attack at Finsbury Park, just as the attack at London Bridge or the concert hall in Manchester, was an attack on our way of life. It was an attack on our open, tolerant and united city. We will not let them win.
Thank you. I have agreed an urgent motion being submitted. The motion is in front of you on your desk. And I ask for the agreement of the Assembly for it to be taken as an urgent motion. Do I have your agreement? Agreed. Thank you. I move the motion circulated in my name and formally seconded by Assembly Member Arbour. Members, London has experienced a number of major incidents over the last months at Westminster, Borough Market, Grenfell Tower in Kensington, and the Muslim Welfare Centre at Finsbury Park. Apparent throughout these events is that ordinary Londoners have shown bravery and compassion, just as London's emergency service officers showed professionalism and dedication to duty. This Assembly puts on record its gratitude to all those who helped and cared for injured and affected Londoners. Over time, lessons can and must be learnt from these recent events. This Assembly will work to shed light on what more, if anything, could be done and should have been done to help keep Londoners safe. But for now, London stands strong and always will be. Thank you.
Formally second.
Right. Can I put the motion to the vote? All those who agree? Unanimous agreement to that motion. Thank you very much. I now will take a 2 minutes adjournment.
GLA Chamber sound. GLA, chamber, sound.
Members back to their seats, please. Thank you. Okay. Right. Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting. Can I go to item 1, apologies for absence and a few announcements from myself.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Assemblymember Copley and Assemblymember Eshalom.
Thank you. Announcements. I would like to welcome Assemblymember Susan Hall to her first meeting at the Assembly. Welcome. Assemblymember Hall is a long-standing councillor in Harrow and a member of the London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority. Members of all parties look forward to working with you. This is the last Assembly meeting for which Mark Roberts is responsible. Just a few words. Mark started with the GLA at its inception in 2000 as the Community Services Manager and rose to become the Executive Director of the Secretariat in 2006. Unfortunately, Mark is not able to be with us today, but on behalf of the Assembly, I would like to wish him all the very best in his retirement and to thank him for all his work for members and for the Assembly and for the GLA over the years. I would like to congratulate Kemi Badenoch on her elections as MP for Saffron Walden and acknowledge her resignation as a member of the Assembly. I would also like to congratulate Assembly Member Florence Eshaloma on the birth of her baby son. And to, on your behalf, congratulate all those Londoners and functional body colleagues who received honours in the Queen's Birthday Honours List. Knight's Bachelor goes to Mark Boliat, lately Chairman, Policy and Resource Committee at the City of London and member of the Mayor's Homes for Londoners Board. We congratulate Mark. CBE for Councillor Chris Robbins, formerly leader of Waltham Forest Council, and as we've heard earlier, PC Keith Palmer was posthumously awarded the George Medal. Finally, I would welcome to the public gallery guests from News Associates School of Journalism, welcome, AS level students from Oasis Academy, graduates from the UCL and graduates from the University College of London and TfL graduates. We also have with us students from Southampton School, and we have students from this. We have members of the school council from St Christina's School in St John's Wood. Right, yeah, wave. Welcome, welcome, thank you. Right, let's go to item 2, declaration of interest. Can I ask the Assembly to note the recommendations set out at item 2? Thank you. I would ask Assembly members to declare any other disclosable pecuniary interest
or other relevant interest where they relate to items on the agenda for today's meeting? I see none. Thank you. You're either declaring or you're keeping still, Assembly Member Prince. What are you doing? Okay. Thanks. Item 3. Can I ask the Assembly to agree the minutes of the London Assembly's annual meeting held on 3rd May 2017 and the extraordinary meeting of the Assembly on 5th June 2017? And if you agree, I'll sign them as correct records.
Agreed.
Thank you. Let's go to the Mayor's report, but let me just make a few words. Members, I have accepted the Mayor's apology as he's unable to stay after 12:30 due to his need to be at a memorial service at 1 o'clock, I think it is. I'm going to ask members to be as brisk as they can be, and the Mayor. Can I ask the Assembly to formally receive the Mayor's report covering the period from 9th March 2017 to 8th June 2017, as well as providing us with an oral update of up to 5 minutes in length on matters occurring since the publication of the report. The Mayor has been asked to respond to requests for updates on his mayoral transport strategy and his future plan for the PHV industry, and he's also been asked on what grounds were protesters in the recent Al-Qud Day March permitted to fly the Hezbollah flag. Over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, may I offer you my congratulations on your appointment as Chair of the London Assembly.
Thank you.
I look forward to your assured chairing of Assembly meetings, and can I also thank Assembly Member Arbour for his excellent work as Chairman over the last year. I also want to extend my congratulations to former Assembly Member Kemi Badenoch on her election as the MP for Saffron Walden, and to welcome Assembly Member Susan Hall as our newest Assembly Member. I look forward to working with you in helping to make London a better place for all. Finally, like you, Chair, I'm sure we're all delighted to hear that Assembly Member Ashalomi recently gave birth to a baby boy, Maliki. Many congratulations to her and her family. Today I've called for the continued membership of the European single market to be at the heart of the government's Brexit negotiations. Even those in favour of Brexit have to accept that the result of the general election has moved the goalposts. I'm now calling for the government to listen to the will of the people and abandon its extreme, hard Brexit approach and secure a deal that protects jobs, investment and prosperity across the country. I believe that a jobs-first Brexit with continued membership of the single market is the only deal that will serve the best interests of London and our country. I've also joined business leaders, the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England in repeating my call for a transitional agreement to be reached with the EU soon. This will allow continued access to the single market until any Brexit deal is finalised and would remove the threat of a cliff edge and give London businesses the security they need to continue investing and growing over the next 2 years. On the 12th of June, I announced my new Cultural Leadership Board. Inspirational leaders from London's world-class creative organisations have been appointed as cultural ambassadors. Their collective experience and passion will ensure we're able to harness the power of culture and creativity to transform communities, drive our capital's economy and maintain our preeminent position on the world stage. I've appointed Claire Waxman as the first Victims Commissioner for London to help dramatically improve the experience of victims in the capital, victims of crime in the capital, alongside a 3-year £47 million investment in services to better support them. Working with victims, the government, the Met Police, the CPS, the Ministry of Justice and others, Claire will act on victims' behalf to ensure their voices are heard, support their recovery and improve their experience of the criminal justice system and ability to recover. Speaking at the launch of London Tech Week last week, I outlined my ambition to harness the new technologies that have been pioneered right here to transform London into the world's leading smart city. The potential for cutting-edge technology to tackle a host of social, economic and environmental challenges is immeasurable. From air pollution and climate change to housing and transport, new technologies and data science will be at the heart of the long-term solutions to urban challenge. I unveiled a new £1.6 million clean tech incubator called Better Futures, which will help 100 London-based small businesses to deliver low-carbon and clean tech products to tackle the causes and effects of climate change. I also officially opened Europe's largest connected technology and business innovation ecosystem, Plexel, at Hare East in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. As you said, Chair, I've been asked to give 2 oral updates from the Conservative Group. Yesterday, I was proud to publish my draft transport strategy for consultation. My bold aim is to reduce the capital's dependency on the car, transforming the experience of walking, cycling and public transport in London over the coming decades. It's my ambition to increase the percentage of journeys made by walking, cycling and public transport to 80% by 2041, up from 64%. My Healthy Streets approach will create a fairer, greener, healthier and more prosperous city, helping Londoners reach at least the 20 minutes of active travel they need each day to stay healthy. I've set out wide-ranging plans for making cycling and walking safe and accessible in every neighbourhood, transforming our network and ensuring new housing is designed directly around access to public transport links. We continue to lobby for Crossrail 2, which is vital to the success of the wider UK economy by creating 1.2 million new jobs and more than 1 million new homes that London desperately needs. My strategy will deliver a more frequent tube service to achieve a fast, accessible, affordable and reliable network across London. It seeks to expand the network further, with the Elizabeth line set to open this year, while TfL will progress extending the Bakerloo line, the DLR line, the Northern line and London Overground. As part of my transport strategy, I will also seek to ensure London has a safe, secure, accessible, world-class taxi and private hire service designed around passengers' needs. I will talk to the government about powers to limit the overall number of private hire vehicles licensed for use in London to ease congestion and help improve air quality, particularly in central London. However, this can only work if we're able to introduce a requirement that all journeys by TfL licensed drivers either start or end in the Greater London area, which is why I've asked TfL to speak to government about putting this in place. I look forward to hearing what members think about my strategy when they put questions to my Deputy Mayor for Transport, Val Shawcross, and Mike Brown, the Transport Commissioner, next week. I've also been asked for an update on the Al-Quds demonstration. I share the very real concerns about this event felt by London's Jewish community and others across the capital. That's why I discussed the policing of this march with the Met Commissioner and wrote to her, stating out my concerns. And it's worth being clear that as Mayor, I do not have the power to ban a march or protest in London. That power lies only with the Home Secretary. However, the Met and I take a zero-tolerance approach to hate crime, including anti-Semitism. Protesters have the right to march as long as they do so within the law. I understand there was one large Hezbollah flag and one flag draped around a wheelchair user. Both were investigated and did not constitute an offence under Section 13 of the Terrorism Act, a law that is set by the government. There were also a number of small flags on sticks, a large number that had stapled on them that they were supporting political Hezbollah. This, of course, is not prescribed. It's the military wing that is. I also understand the MPS had good engagement with both groups at the march and had a dedicated Jewish officer who was well known to the community advising the command team. The Gold Commander also had language speakers monitoring all the speakers and chanting.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Assembly Member Curtin. It's in your hands. If you ask questions... Sorry? I'm just saying... I saw you first, but I understand that Assembly Member Prince had his hand up as well. Can you just... I'll get on with it. Assembly Member Prince. Yes?
Mr Mayor, thank you for all you have done over the last few weeks in relation to the different attacks and tragedies. Can I just say that we welcome your transport strategy. There are, I think, going to be quite a few questions coming out of that, and I certainly will be responding to the consultation. I think, Mr Mayor, it is regrettable that you will not be able to attend the Transport Committee where we are looking at that transport strategy, and we would welcome to have a conversation with you at some point. However, having said all that, What I'd like to focus on today specifically is around bus deaths. You've set a target, Mr. Mayor, in your strategy of ending deaths by bus by 2030. Do you not think that that could be achieved far sooner?
Absolutely, that's the long stop key, as I remember, Prince. So the Zero Vision plan is to make sure we have zero deaths from of pedestrians, cyclists and others, including bus as well. That's a long stop, and I'd want to reach there much sooner.
Are there any of the measures you think that you could bring forward, Mr. Mayor?
There's lots of things we're already doing. I think the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street will make things, will improve things, particularly in central London. We're improving the quality of training of bus drivers. The Zero Vision cabins will make a difference. Making sure that the Walking and Cycling Commissioner, Will Norman, is consulted in relation to road layout, because we've got to make roads not just for vehicles, but also think about those who walk and cycle as well. The location of bus stops is also important, particularly around cycle lanes.
Just one other point, Mr. Mayor. Are you aware that the TfL reward bus operators for achieving timetable targets, but they don't reward bus operators, or there's no incentives in relation to improving safety?
The TfL board is looking at the issue of safety on buses, a particular concern that's been raised. What we don't want is perverse incentives. The reason why there are incentives to make buses efficient in relation to getting from A to B on time is you'll be aware one of the reasons why Londoners give for not using buses now is because of the uncertainty to get from A to B. We're helping that in relation to roadworks and other things we're doing, from priority traffic lights to junctions, but obviously bus companies can do a lot as well.
Okay, thank you.
Assemblymember Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your statement, and particularly for broaching the issue of the Al-Quds Day parade, where Hezbollah flags are marched through the streets of London. The Hezbollah flag, as you probably know, has a gun, an assault rifle on the front, and it causes great distress and alarm to lots of people. You did mention the loophole that allows it to happen, in that the political wing of Hezbollah is not prescribed as a terrorist organisation, whereas the military wing is. Unlike countries like the United States, Israel, France and the Netherlands, where the whole of Hezbollah is prescribed as a terrorist organisation. Now, in the Mayor's question time last year, on the 20th of July, I did ask you about that, whether you would call for the political wing of Hezbollah to be prescribed, and you would probably need to approach Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, to do that. And you said, no, that's not what I've committed to do. But in the light of everything that's happened this year, and what you know now is maybe more than what you knew 11 months ago after a year in the job. I want to ask you again, Mr. Mayor, will you call or do anything to ask and see that the political wing of Hezbollah is proscribed as a terrorist organisation in this country? Because that will close the loophole that stops people marching through the streets of London with a flag with a gun on it.
Well, there's nothing stopping you writing to the Home Secretary.
I will, and I hope you will wish me success. But you, as the Mayor, are in a very, very powerful position. If you do this, it will be a very powerful voice to stop to close this loophole.
Can I suggest, Chair, that the Assembly Member sends me all the letters he sent over the last year, which I'll consider, and then I'll read those letters he sent and then decide whether to do so. But I remember the representations made by Senator Dismore, Senator Bacon, and others after the march last year, and I was concerned by representations made from the community, which is why I discussed this matter with the Commissioner and wrote to her. You'll be aware, of course, being well versed with the law, but it's the Home Secretary who decides whether marches take place, but also whether organisations are prescribed. And once I've read your letters setting up the evidence, I'm sure I'll consider whether writing to Home Secretary is the right thing to do.
Okay. It seems I have an answer of sorts. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Dismore.
Jewish community in the country, in Barnet and Camden, and there's been a lot of concern about this protest, Al-Quds demonstration, and I wrote to the police myself about it, and I attended the counter-protest and spoke at the counter-protest. I am concerned there's been a bit of mischief making by some people who've been blaming you for what happened, rather than actually reflecting that the powers actually lie with the Home Secretary. There is concern that there's a false distinction between the alleged political wing and the military wing of Hezbollah. But I simply put it this way: if there was a distinction, wouldn't it have been better if those flags, instead of displaying a Kalashnikov, displayed the ballot box?
I think your logic can't be argued with. But can I just say this? I mean, it's just worth us recognising the difficult job the police have. The police sought legal advice. They had people on the ground who are well versed in the languages. But the law is the law, as you'll appreciate, and you'll be aware, of course, that the Home Secretary can, if she wanted to, prescribe the political wing of Hezbollah. She doesn't need to wait for a letter from Senator Curtin or the Mayor of London. And you're right, of course, but it's worth us also remind ourselves that a lot of people, a lot of Londoners, are caused huge distress by demonstrations with flags being waved, which is questioning the existence of not just states, but also people who are very concerned about families and others, and it's recognising that children and others were also in the demonstration, which also raises lots of questions.
Okay. Assembly Member Boff.
Mr. Mayor, last year you said you acquainted us with the problems that the police have with regard to policing these kinds of demonstrations, and it's not always very easy just to go in and snatch a person who may be displaying an illegal banner. You did, however, at the time say that the police tend to use video and subsequently will prosecute or take further action as required. Could you write to me and let me know what action was taken as a result of last year's Al-Quds March, which you undertook at the time? Could you undertake to do that?
Happy to do so, Chair.
Thank you. With regard to the questions that have already been raised with you, do you understand how difficult it is for the police to make that subtle distinction between what is the political wing and what is the military wing of an organisation that fundamentally, in its core, is a violent organisation?
Well, particularly, I mean, just to give you an example, that some of the flag had stapled on them the word political, and so you can appreciate the loopholes that are obviously there, but of course I do.
Do you think that your opinion would assist in the Home Secretary putting into place perhaps a redefinition of what is a banned organisation in order that the police can do their job, do a better job? And I'm sure that it's in your interest, you want the police to be able to do a better job and have laws and definitions which assist them in doing their job.
Well, of course, Chair, if the Senator wants to send me all the letters he's written, the evidence he has to the Home Secretary, I'll also consider that as well.
You will consider that, but you will write to the Home Secretary to say that this needs clarification?
I'll read all the letters you've written to the Home Secretary and consider whether that gives me the grounds to write to the Home Secretary.
I'm sorry, I'm asking about you, Mr. Mayor. What action will you take with regard to making the job of police in these demonstrations easier for our police officers?
The biggest help I can give to the police in doing their job is to get sufficient resources they need from the government. And that's what I've been doing first and foremost. The more resources they have, the better they can do their job in police in London. And that includes demonstrations, obviously, in relation to police in protests, having people to speak the language, people to take video evidence, people to seek legal advice from the CPS. I'm sure you'll join me in doing my best to give the police the resources they need to keep us safe.
There was a reply about 2 questions ago, which would have been fine if you just said, yes, I'll do that. But you seem to be avoiding saying, yes, I'll do that. So let's try and readdress it. Will you write to the Home Secretary and say that we need to clarify what is a banned and not banned organisation in order to assist policing such demonstrations in the future? Will you do that?
I'm really happy to read all the correspondence you've sent to the Home Secretary.
Will you do that, Mr. Mayor? Will you do that? Don't ask me what I'm doing. I'm asking what you're doing. Will you do that?
I'm really happy to read all the letters you've sent to the Home Secretary and consider whether there's evidence to make the submissions you want me to make.
Will you, Mr. Mayor, look after the interests of the Jewish population of London and write to the Home Secretary to ask for the clarification of the rules on what is a banned organisation?
I've been in close contact with the Met Police Commissioner. One of the best ways to protect vulnerable Jewish Londoners is to get more resources for the police service. That's what I intend to do. And if you want to join me in that, it makes my life a lot easier.
I will join you when you start doing your job, Mr. Mayor. thank you very much for those answers. I'm sure Londoners will be fascinated with your lack of willingness to address this problem.
Well, can I congratulate you on that pre-written rant from you. It's appreciated.
Okay,
if you want to check, I'll show you. You show me your briefing. I'll show you mine. All right?
Okay.
We'll have a deal on that.
Okay.
Calm down. Just calm down.
Mayor, that's my job. Okay. We'll move on. Thank you,
Yes.
Assembly Member.
That's a useless answer that I've ever seen in this assembly.
Sorry, did you say something?
We will move on. No, we're moving on. We are moving on. The next question to you is in the name of Assembly Member Twycross. Question number 2017-2568.
Can I thank you for your question? Since becoming Mayor, I've spent every day fighting to ensure that all Londoners get the opportunities that our city gave to me. Change is hard and it requires constant work, but I'm hugely proud of what we've been able to achieve in just over a year, delivering on my manifesto promises. Unfortunately, it will take too long now to list everything we've done, so I'll mention a few things. We've made commuting more affordable for millions of Londoners by freezing all TfL fares and introducing the Hopper bus fare, which gives you 2 journeys for the price of 1 in an hour. We've got the night tube up and running. We've made big strides in the marathon job of turning around London's housing crisis with a record £3.15 billion investment to build genuinely affordable homes. And just last month, I was delighted to be able to hand over the keys to families moving into the first of our new London living rent homes. My new lower rent scheme, which boosts the home owning dreams of many tenants. We've started implementing the most ambitious plans to tackle air pollution of any city in the world. We've prioritised neighbourhood policing, delivering an extra dedicated police officer in every ward in London. We've appointed the first ever female Commissioner of the Met Police and the London Fire Brigade. We've launched the new Police and Crime Plan for London, which includes how we'll confront extremism, keep children safe and tackle violence against women and girls. And we've invested a record amount in giving Londoners the skills they need for the jobs of tomorrow. But of course, there's still much more to do, and I'm determined that we keep up the pace of change. Over the next year and beyond, I'll be continuing to deliver my manifesto and working to make a real difference to Londoners' lives.
Thank you. That's very welcome. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to hand over for colleagues who have got supplementaries on this. Thank you.
Okay, Assembly Member Sahota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your response. I would also like to thank you for your leadership that you've shown, particularly during the massive crisis we've had on behalf of Londoners and to Londoners. We also appreciate that your predecessors, inertia on the critical issue of air quality for Londoners, left you with a poisoned chalice on this issue. As you've said, poor air quality affects the living environment of our capital with devastating consequences on the health and the lives of Londoners throughout the city. Earlier this year, the GLA Conservatives published a report on this issue, criticising your plans by stating that you won't get enough bang for your buck. But surely you would agree with me, Mr. Mayor, that there should be no price on the lives of Londoners and the health of children's lungs. Mr. Mayor, do you think it's fair to say that you're leading the way in tackling air quality in London?
Can I thank you for your question? You know from your other life as a doctor the consequences of poor quality air. Over 9,000 Londoners died prematurely because of poor quality air. Adults are suffering ill health because of poor quality air, from dementia, heart issues to asthma. It is a real problem in our city. The economic cost of poor quality air in London alone is approaching 4 billion, across the country 20 billion. And so we've got to deal with this. The previous mayor fiddled air quality monitors, took no action, and it beggars belief that the Tory group are still opposed to my plans to bring in the T-charge this year, Ultra Low Emission Zone from 2019. We've now got an air quality alert system, so rather than hiding the information, we're letting the public know about the information. And whereas the Labour group supported my budget to double the amount we spend on air quality, the Tory group opposed it. And what I'm hoping now, Dr. Sahota, is the new Secretary of State for Environment, Michael Gove, who doesn't believe in evidence-based policy, as we know from the Brexit campaign, looks at the evidence, changes as a habit of a lifetime, and recognises that the government's got to have bold plans to help us address the issue of poor quality air.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that answer.
Assembly Member Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, you introduced your Hopper bus scheme. Can you tell us how has that scheme changed London's travel patterns?
Well, can I just deal with that in a second, but say this. I had plans, during the campaign, I announced unlimited bus travel within an hour. And my opponent said it couldn't be done, you can't do it. And there is an issue about the technology in relation to unlimited bus travel within an hour. But rather than waiting to fix the technology, which we'll do shortly in the next couple of years, we brought in the bus hopper, which is really important, which is a 2-for-1 within an hour. And it's changed the lives, particularly of Londoners in outer London, which you're very passionate about. It's changed the lives of those who are working, changing buses twice to get to work, and others who get about London. It's changed the lives of Assembly members who, rather than waiting for the right bus, can hop on a bus and get home quicker rather than waiting for their bus. And that's what an accessible, affordable transport system is about. And I remind you of this, Assembly Member Shah. The last mayor increased fares over his 8-year duration by 42%. So the public transport fares in London are the most expensive in Europe, and had plans to increase them by a further 17% in the first year of this mayoralty. With frozen TfL fares, brought in the hopper fare, which shows what a good mayor can do for a great city.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? No. Your next question is from Assembly Member Bacon.
Can I thank you for the question, as it gives me the chance to again call on Assembly members of all parties to back me in asking the government to drop their police funding formula and any suggestion of reduced funding for the Met. The Met have already reduced costs by nearly £600 million since 2010, and the government's current funding settlement requires them to reduce costs by a further £400 million by 2020-2021. I'm already working hard with the Met to deliver greater efficiency and to minimise the impact of government cuts on frontline officer numbers. However, before the election, the Conservative government was about to launch a consultation on a new police funding formula. The last time they did this in 2015, estimates suggest their proposals could have led to a funding reduction of up to £700 million for the Met. I'm doing everything possible to protect the number of frontline officers, but the Met could not absorb additional cuts on this scale without its officers' numbers reducing. If this £700 million were paid for through fewer officers, we could see a considerable reduction in numbers, anywhere between 3,400 officers and 12,800 fewer officers, depending on the amount of resources that are cut. The tragic events over recent weeks have shown the crucial importance of a properly funded police force, indeed properly funded emergency services across the board. The last consultation on police funding had serious errors in Home Office calculations, and I fear they're about to make another serious miscalculation which will have a big impact on policing in London.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still waiting for the answer about where the 12,800 police officers came from. I think it's probably in there somewhere, but would you like to clarify that?
The average cost of a police office in London is £55,000. If the government proceeds with £700 million worth of cuts, bearing in mind we've already made back office savings, we've reduced staff numbers, PCSOs are gone, sold 100 police stations, we're having to close further police stations across London. The only other place we can go now is police officers. Yeah, so it's 700 million is the answer then. There's two numbers. Depending on what calculations the government uses, it's 184 million or 700 million. That's why I gave two figures for police officers. If it's 184 million pounds cuts on top of the 1 billion, by the way, that equates to, roughly speaking, 3,800 officers, 3,400 officers. If it's top end 700 million pounds on top of the 1 billion pounds, that equates to 12,800 fewer officers.
And you're attributing that to the police funding formula review?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's not accurate, though, is it, Mr. Mayor?
It is.
No, it's not. You were a Member of Parliament at the time, and you should already know this, that actually the police funding formula review, and you have correctly said that there were bugs found in it which caused it to be cancelled, that plus pressure from up and down the country, not least from your predecessor, had identified a potential cut of £184 million, and that's where the 184 comes from. The £700 million was coming from the comprehensive spending review, and non-protected budgets have been told to prepare for 25 to 40% cuts. That was at the same time, so I can understand where the confusion is, but the reality is those are from completely separate processes, isn't it?
I think you've got your numbers wrong, and I hope to write you. So let me get so in
actually,
2010, in 2010, the editor of the Evening Standard, who was the Chancellor then, made the police cut 18% from the police budget. The current Prime Minister, who is the Home Secretary, acceded to that request of 18% cut from the
I'm not talking about that, Mr. Mayor. I'm talking about the 184.
I'm sorry, we are.
No, no.
I'm sorry, we are.
No, no.
Because that's led to the consequence of $1 billion cuts we've seen coming down, which has led to 3,000 staff going, CSOs going, police stations being closed down, police buildings being sold. There's no more fat to cut.
Nobody's asking about that at all. The £600 million is a matter of record, and we don't disagree with that. The £400 million additional savings that need to be found, nobody's disagreeing with that either. The query that I have is about the 184 and the £700 million, which you have incorrectly attributed as a range going from the police funding formula. It isn't. £184 million was the indicative figure from the police funding formula review. £700 million was on top of that was going to come from the comprehensive spending review. And as you should know, because you were a Member of Parliament at the time, both of those were dropped in 2015. So why are you using out-of-date figures that are 2 years out of date, knowing that they've already been dropped?
Well, firstly, I don't accept that. But secondly, he will know as a
It's a matter of public record, Mr. Mayor. You don't have to accept that it's true.
We can either ask questions and answer them, or
well, you can try answering them. That would be a start, wouldn't it?
Can I answer now?
Absolutely. I'm all ears.
So you'll be aware that the Conservative Party, before the general election, had plans to revisit the funding formula.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not unreasonable to assume, if their previous plans led to cuts to London of between £184 million and £700 million, that a new police funding formula change would also lead to cuts at that level. Now, I'm pleased that the Conservatives failed to win the big mandate Theresa May wanted. What's important is not simply not having an extreme hard Brexit, but this being a reason for the government to go back and revisit whether it's sensible to make these cuts to London. And I hope he'll join me rather than playing party politics.
Mr. Mayor, accusing me of playing party politics really is the pot calling the kettle black. The 184 million to 700 million, as we have just established, is you have conflated two figures.
We haven't established. It's been said by the...
It is a matter of public record, Mr. Mayor. You were a Member of Parliament at the time. Were you asleep or something? Did you not listen at the time? You would have sat in the House of Commons chamber when the Chancellor announced that this was going to happen. Well, and when the Home Secretary announced that the police funding formula was being scrapped. They are completely different figures from completely different processes, and they were scrapped 2 years ago. So why are you bandying those figures around in the public domain right now?
I'll answer again, Chair. But the previous Conservative government's plans to change the police funding formula led to us losing between £184 million.
But they didn't, Mr. Mayor. You have misunderstood the situation. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know it looks discourteous, but you're running out of my time. I've only got 17 minutes left, and I'll keep you on the hook for the whole of those 17 minutes if I have to, because you are deliberately confusing Londoners on this point. Now let's move on from that point. The £400 million that you've talked about, and you are...
Be clear, I don't
no, sorry, I'm speaking, Madam Chairman. He can answer in a moment. The way it works is that I ask the question, he answers, then ask the question, and he answers.
No, do get on with your question, Assembly Member.
Thank you very much. I will do that. Now, the £400 million that you have referred to as a cut, incessantly, you are pushing to protect police funding, and we support you on that, but there's no discrepancy about that at all. You've issued over 30 press releases about the police since you've been Mayor. 6 have directly related to funding. The first of which was in January of this year, and the last one was yesterday. And you have referred to £400 million of cuts in yesterday's press release. Well, there's not going to be £400 million of cuts, is there?
A reduction to our budget is a cut. I mean,
it's not a reduction to your budget, though, is it? You know, categorically, that what is actually happening is there is a cash freeze to your budget. Now, that's not the same as saying that the budget is being uprated in line with inflation and other spending pressures, and I completely acknowledge that, but it is not a cut to the budget, is it?
It's a cut to our budget.
No, it's not a cut to the budget, Mr. Mayor. I know you need to sort of get up to speed with this, but that is not a cut to the budget, and you are misleading people again. Now, that £400 million was known about long before you became Mayor of London. Your predecessor said that £300 million of that money had been allocated before he had even left office, so before you were elected, that money was found. And that is proven by an audit panel report to MOPAC dated in 24th of June last year, in which it says that £300 million has been found out of that £400 million. That's also been confirmed on numerous occasions by Assistant Commissioner Craig Mackey appearing in front of the Assembly at various different meetings. So 300 of that £400 million that you're talking about of efficiency savings that are required has already been found and already been allocated. So what have you been doing for the last 12 months to find the other £100 million?
I'm not really sure if you need me for this. You just carry on.
Would you like to answer the question, Mr. Mayor?
What's the question?
The question was, what have you been doing for the last 12 months to find the £100 million that is not yet allocated?
Which money? The £1 billion? Which we're talking about? The £1 billion, £7 million?
I appreciate that your hyperbole is making you a bit confused here, Mr Mayor. The £600 million has already been banked. There was a further £400 million that needed to be found by 2021. Everybody knows that. That was a fact established long before you became the Mayor of London. 300 of that £400 million was found before you took office. So what have you been doing for the last 12 months to find that £100 million that is missing?
You'll be aware from the questions you asked, answered by the Commissioner, the Deputy Commissioner and the Deputy Mayor for Policing this week, of all the stuff we've been doing to make efficiency savings. The point that you don't seem to understand...
Yes, what you're actually doing is all the things that are already being done, Mr Mayor. I'm asking what you are doing to close the gap.
Again, interrupting an answer because you want to speak...
That's because you're misleading people, Mr Mayor. You're not answering the question. You're going all around the houses and you're using your usual smokescreen, but you're not answering the question.
Fair,
what have you been doing for the last 12 months to find that £100 million? Focus on that. The 300 is already there. We know that. The police have found it. What are you doing for the 100?
Every time I try and answer your question, you interrupt me.
That's because you start telling me fibs, Mr Mayor.
Okay, Assemblymember Bacon, give the Mayor an opportunity to answer a question.
Can I just say to the children, this is not the way to behave as a school councillor. I hope you behave, and I hope you behave better than your school councillor.
No, Mr Mayor, that's not, Assembly Member Bacon is actually demonstrating real skills in his role as a scrutineer. He's using evidence and he's put several questions to you. Now, I'd like you to answer those questions if you can. If not, pass, and then we'll move on.
We've made huge savings over the last 13 months, Chair. We've made huge savings from things like back office costs being reduced to 16-17%, huge savings in relation to ICT, huge savings in relation to the police estate, huge savings in relation to the number of CSOs, huge savings in relation to reducing the tier of policing grades, huge savings in relation to police buildings. And so the savings that I've made, I think, are good progress. But the reality is, Chair, we simply can't afford to make the further cuts that the government's requiring us to do. And I appreciate why, if you're a Conservative politician, you feel on the back foot and you've got to be rude and offensive at MPTs. But to you as Mayor, my most important job is to keep London safe. And I will not apologise for making the case to the Home Secretary and to the Prime Minister, who was the previous Home Secretary.
Nor should you, Mr Mayor. And we have made similar cases, as you can imagine. And we fully support the idea that the Metropolitan Police should be fully funded. What we don't support, however, Mr Mayor, is your deliberate attempt to mislead people over the scale of the issue and over the lack of action that you yourself have been taking. So you can't answer the question of what you've been doing over the £100 million that you need to find. Okay, how many police counters are you going to close?
I mean, that's work we're undertaking now in relation to the BCU work. But you'll appreciate, because of the general election, that stopped us doing the consultation. But you'll very shortly be hearing about the plans we have related to that. Again, those have been done because of the cuts made by central government. You better call them cuts. I call them cuts.
Yes, I know you call them cuts, Mr Mayor. It is very debatable about whether or not that's the right term or not. But anyway, how long have you been working on closing police counters?
We've been consulting with the boroughs across London, and we'll be announcing plans shortly, but obviously for reasons you'll appreciate, because of the general election, we couldn't announce those during the PERDA period.
So you have concrete plans on what you're going to be doing? We
have got plans to make the savings the government's require us to make.
Okay. Where in your police and crime plan, that was published in March, does it state those plans?
I've not got a copy to hand.
You don't have a copy to hand? Okay. I can answer the question. It doesn't state that, Mr Mayor. That's surprising, isn't it?
No, there's a number of things we're doing to make savings, from police counters to police buildings to police stations to BC, borough command units, many of which have been raised at MQTs previously, to staff, police staff, to CSOs, a whole host of things we've got to do.
But why aren't you being upfront about closing police counters? You've been very upfront in some of the press releases that have been issued. Why have you not been upfront in your police and crime plan?
So, Chair, you can't have it both ways. On one front, there's press releases which shows you're upfront. On the other hand, someone was accusing the Mayor of not being upfront. The reality is this: if the government proceeds with its cuts, we will need to close half the police stations in London, which could lead to each borough only having one 24-hour, 7 days a week police station up to the public, and the busiest boroughs may have another one. That's the consequence of the cuts. I appreciate you don't like the word cuts. That's the consequence of the cuts from
which cuts are we talking about, Mr Mayor? 184 million, 700 million, 600 million, 400 million?
Combination of the £1 billion cuts in total, 600 billion from 2010 until now.
So that's already banked? That's
400 million pounds. No, 400 million pounds going forward. But also, of course, the funding formula changes, the lack of NICS money, but also the lack of inflation increases. And also, you'll be aware, Chair, because it's a letter that's in public domain, that the Home Secretary criticised the previous mayor for his funding regime.
Yes, you're deflecting again, Mr. Mayor. I'm not asking you about that.
See, again,
I'm asking you about...
I'm answering the question.
Let him finish.
With all due respect, Madam Chairman, he is wasting my time deliberately. It's a well-proven tactic. He deflects and then he prevaricates and he wastes time.
No, you are...
I've asked him a precise question. He's now talking about something else entirely.
No, you're required to let him answer your
Indeed,
question.
but I'm not required to allow him to filibuster all of my time.
Well, the clock's still on.
And you should stop him as well.
No, the clock is still on. Mr. Mayor, will you finish the answer to the question that you...
It really isn't worth it. It's not listening.
Okay.
Right, so the £600 million, which is already removed from the Met's budget, that can't be a factor in closing the police councils going forward. The funding formula review, there have been very strong indications, and you yourself have issued a press release about this. It looks as though the government have dropped that, so that's no longer a threat. So the last press release that you issued yesterday focused primarily on the £400 million, which you are calling cuts, but they are cost of, they're efficiency savings, and Craig Mackey yesterday in front of the Police and Crime Committee confirmed that that was what they were. They weren't cuts. He deliberately moved away from the word cuts. So that £400 million, 300 of which has already been found, so we're talking about £100 million that needs to find. How much of that is going to be made up by future front counter closures?
Chair, I've had no confirmation from the government they're dropping the funding formula. If Senator Bacon has, he should share that with us. Has he had confirmation from the
What I said,
Conservative
Mr. Mayor, was that there have been very strong lines in the media, and you commented it. I'm pleased that the government look likely to drop their plans to change the police funding formula.
I've had no confirmation of this. And if you have, please let me know. If you've
No,
got
I'm
friends
not.
in the Tory party who've
Mr.
told
Mayor,
you, not me, please let me know.
You're deflecting again, because I didn't say that I had confirmation or any such thing. I got that news from your comment in this press release, so I'm assuming that you're in the know. Are you not in the know then? Did you make that up?
I'm glad on some things he believes me, but just not on others.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm afraid that's the nature of the game, isn't it? Mr. Mayor, the press release that was issued by the Labour Party dated the 30th of May 2017 made reference to the 600 million that's already been found, the fact that a further 400 million would have to be found, and it referred to it as cuts, and that the Met would face a further cut of 184 to 700 million pounds if the Conservative plans went forward. We've heard that those plans are not going forward. The 184 and 700, you've misunderstood what they are. How many police front counters are you going to close? Because the only reason to close them now is the £400 million of efficiency savings. So how many are you planning to close? And when did you make that decision?
As I've said, it looks like we'll have to close down half the police stations in London, which could mean each borough will have one 24/7.
Yes, but that assumption, Mr. Mayor, is that predicated on making the efficiency savings of £400 million, or is that predicated on your worst-case scenario of a further £700 million coming out of the Met's budget?
As the Deputy Commissioner said to you yesterday, because he was concerned you didn't understand this, you can't look at the police as discrete portions. It's all linked. And the policing is all linked. So you can't disaggregate cuts made of £1 billion over a 7-year period. You can't disaggregate that from us not receiving NIC's funding completely. You can't disaggregate that from a police funding formula change. You can't disaggregate that from us not getting inflation increases that the police deserve. And so it's all part of the same monies we use to provide a police service for London.
Mr. Mayor, though, clarity is very important here. We are living in a time of great uncertainty. People are very worried. We've had a number of terrorist attacks nationwide and also in London. What you say as the leader of London's government in public matters very much indeed. And the timing of some of your comments, made as they were in the heat of a general election campaign, implying things are much worse than they are, is actually not the way to go forward.
Can I say, Chair? Can I just say...
No, you can't, because I'm speaking, Mr. Mayor. You can speak after I've finished. The £600 million
Can we get
is
to
already...
a question? Can we get to a question?
The £600 million has already been banked. The further £400 million, which you now know are efficiency savings and not cuts, it is unlikely, from what you have said and from what the government apparently have said, that there will be any change to the police funding formula. The NIC funding is rolled up in that £400 million. It's not an additional pressure, it's a pressure that we already know about. What you say in public matters very much, Mr. Mayor. So why are you deliberately misleading Londoners as to the scale of the challenge?
It's time for me.
That's the question.
Okay, fine. So I don't apologise, and I will never apologise for being an advocate for this city. And if it's the case that the government is letting us down, as they have been, I will make that case. London is less safe because of the cuts made by this government. The cuts made from the government of £600 million during the last 6 years, another £400 million over the next 4 years. We're going to receive half of the money we're due as an international capital city. The government's previous plans were to reduce up to £700 million. We've not got a real terms cash increase from inflation increase from the government. The Home Secretary has criticised the previous mayor, I appreciate a rival for the leadership in the Tory party, for his decision last year not to increase the police precept. Now, I've taken the responsible thing to increase the police precept this year because we need those money, but also because we'll be penalised in future years by the government. But if it's the case that Conservatives are getting hot under the collar because their governments let them down, they should make that case with the same anger and passion to them privately as they're making to me publicly.
Mr Mayor, we have made the case very often to the government in private. The fact of the matter, Mr Mayor, you haven't answered any of these questions satisfactorily. The £600 million is already banked. The £174 million that you're looking for the NIC funding is already part of the funding pressure. The £400 million was known about before you became mayor, and £300 million of that has already been allocated. You have used deliberately inflammatory language, primarily during an election campaign, to boost your party's chances. You should be thoroughly ashamed of the way that you've handled this, Mr Mayor.
And my response, because I'm sure that's a question, because the Assembly member must be experienced enough to realise you can't make speeches in MQTs, is I also, outside Finsbury Park, after the general election, made the same point. Our police do a fantastic job. Their job is made much harder when they're stretched, which they currently are. Head of the counter-terror team, Mark Rowley, no politician has said how stretched the police are. And that stretch is because of decisions made by central government. And you should be ashamed, as somebody who's a member of the Tory party, not saying more about your government rather than lecturing me as a Labour politician.
Mr Mayor,
Okay.
we speak to our government all the time.
Yes. Assembly Member Bacon, can I have a question?
No, I don't think it's worth it, Madam Chairman.
Okay,
I don't get
thank
answers.
you. Let's move on. Assembly Member Berry, the Mayor, answer to Assembly Member Berry's question on estate regeneration.
Can I thank you very much for your question, which is very relevant for obvious reasons. We know that when done well, estate regeneration can improve lives, homes, local areas. In most cases, councils and house associations work closely with their residents and offer them the guarantees they deserve. But unfortunately, we know this is not always the case. That's why, as Mayor, I decided to get involved and use the power of my office to make sure residents are at the heart of any regeneration plans. No previous mayor has done this. This is the first time City Hall has decided proactively to lay down some expectations around estate regeneration in our city. This is despite the fact, as you know, there are limits on how far I can insist on principles in my good practice guide being followed. I can use my funding powers, where GLAs invest in, and planning powers where they apply. But beyond these formal powers, I also want to see residents empowered. By setting out guarantees that I believe should be offered, I want my guide to underpin conversations between councils or house associations and their residents whenever generation has been reconsidered. It's worth me saying, in the light of the fire at Grenfell Tower last week, there are also many issues around fire safety on estates that are covered by national regulations rather than any powers that my office holds. It is crucial that these are looked at in the upcoming public inquiry and the government acts on them without delay. In my draft guide, I set out some key expectations I have around the protection of existing social housing and guarantees that tenants and leaseholders will be treated fairly. I also set out my initial expectations around how residents should be involved from the very start in discussions around plans for estate regeneration. I've got a longer answer, Chair, but I want to give the member a chance to ask me questions. So I'll write you the long...
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. You'll be very short of time, and I did table this question before the disaster, though it does bring into focus some of the issues. Can I ask whether your final guidance on estates will be delayed now until the preliminary report of the public inquiry comes forward? It may have recommendations relating to public engagement and empowerment.
Good question. I don't want to delay them for obvious reasons, because the sooner they come in, the sooner they can be used. But you'll be aware the guidance is in relation to estate regeneration, and there may be lessons learned from the public inquiry. I'm not sure if even the interim report will deal with that part of...
I'm hoping that it will.
We're all hoping, but we'll have to wait and see what the Chair decides. Okay. And so the conundrum for me is to get on with publishing the guidance and if need be revisit them later on or delay it. And that's a conversation I'm happy to have with you and other colleagues, Chair.
Okay, as long as it bears in mind the results. I'm talking primarily about resident empowerment here, and on Tuesday I visited J&B Leather Market and saw the resident-led infill project on the Kipling estate, which is very heartening to see. It has good local support precisely because residents were fully in control of that process, not simply engaged, they were running it. Obviously we've seen in huge contrast the treatment of the residents of Grenfell Tower. They were treated very badly, they had very little practical support, even when they asked for funding for independent professional advice. Your draft guidance says that local authorities are encouraged to consider independent capacity building and advocacy support for residents. So will the draft guidance go further and make this more than just encouragement so that residents do get the professional help and legal advice that they need when there are changes being made to their estates?
Can I say, Chair, one of the reasons when I don't answer all the questions to respect the lack of time is, some of this was in the answer I was going to give you, which is we've got to recognise there's a reason why no mayor's done this before, because the mayor's got no locus. The levers I have got are in relation to planning and in relation to funding. Say for those two, there's no obligation.
When planning permission is required, though, you can make requirements.
Oh, sure. So my point being, so on the issues around planning and funding, obviously I've got more locus and more levers to pull, and I'll be doing that. And you've been involved in the consultation process. What we can do, though, is nudge councils, housing associations and others to behave responsibly. And I think one of the things that Grenfell Tower has shown to everyone else who doesn't know this area as well as you and some others of us do, Senator McCopley and others, is actually that when it comes to the involvement of tenants and residents generally, there are failings all across London. Okay, great. I've only got like a few more seconds, but I'd be really happy to have a meeting with you to discuss some of this in more detail if you'd be willing. I really want to talk also about what you said in the Observer on Sunday. I'm really concerned. I've had lots of residents of towers get in touch with me, really concerned that you seem to be calling for their towers to be pulled down. You said something about them being the worst mistakes of the 60s and 70s. I know that my own council is focused entirely on blocks that they've reclad in the 21st century, and I think it isn't helpful to jump straight to talking about more demolition. Well, you'll be aware, because you never mislead. I said if it is the case that tower blocks are shown to be a death trap, we've got to make sure they're not a death trap. If that means pulling them down, we've got to pull them down. The good news is, it looks like it seems to be, and obviously CLG is working on this with our help, it looks like the concerns in relation to those properties refurbished, the cladding and how that was done, rather than a design fault in older tower blocks. And so the public inquiry will obviously be useful in finding out what is safe and what isn't. Okay, thank you. I'm really sorry we have to stop, but I will want to talk to you more about this in the future.
Okay, thank you. Mr Mayor, the next question is from Assembly Member Curtin, and it's about your one-year review. But if you could start by focusing on the last part of the... Oh, sorry. Let's go back. Assembly Member Hall, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Despite making much of listening to residents' requests and desires, in March you approved a 17-storey building in Harrow and a 21-storey building in Haringey against the express wishes of the local councils and, of course, the residents. Local residents are now extremely concerned about the safety of these towers following the tragedy at Grenfell Tower. Will you therefore urgently review these decisions to ensure that they are still fit for purpose and will not pose a fire safety risk either now or in the future?
Well, can I congratulate you on being a new Assembly member? I'm surprised by your question, because you should know, as an experienced councillor, that new blocks are different from old blocks and from refurbs. And you'll know, as an experienced councillor, which I'm surprised by your question, that the requirements for new blocks are different to old blocks.
Yes, I accept that, and this was a quick question for you to ask. There's certainly evidence in the information that Haringey is going to have sprinklers, but not so in any of the documents that we can find in Harrow. You shouldn't be surprised by that question, because this is going against what the local residents want. In fact, Assembly Member Shah voted against this and wanted to, or rather expressed desire not to have this. So you shouldn't be surprised about these questions, because if you say you're a listening mayor, then you need to listen to what the local residents want. And they certainly didn't want this in Harrow, and I don't think they wanted it in Haringey.
Well, I listen to Londoners, and I'm sorry you don't realise this, but Londoners want affordable housing. London's population is growing. Unless we meet Londoners' needs, unless we meet Londoners' need to provide genuinely affordable homes, Londoners are going to struggle. And the biggest issue for Londoners is housing. And because I listen to Londoners, I'm providing affordable housing. And the fact is that inquiry was had. We looked at all the evidence and decided to approve the plans. Affordable housing for local residents, regeneration of that area, taking on board some of the concerns. But I'm surprised you don't realise that new buildings are much safer than the old ones or ones refurbished.
Okay. Mr Mayor, you've got a question from Assembly Member Curtin on your one-year review. Can I ask you to go to the final part of that? I'm sure David will agree, because some of it has been answered.
I think all three parts will... The first part, actually, I received an answer just recently. So, I mean, the bits that I'm still looking for are the things about Park Royal the trees being planted.
Okay. How many jobs will be lost in the 2,000 businesses at Park Royal, which will have to close or relocate? And are you going to plant 2 million trees you promised in your manifesto?
So with regards to Park Royal, it's London's largest industrial area and plays a key role in London's economy. The priority for Park Royal is to protect, strengthen and intensify the industrial area so that 10,000 additional jobs can be created. In OPDC's emerging local plan, all of the industrial land in Park Royal outside of the Old Oak core development area is being protected as a strategic industrial location to ensure that businesses and jobs remain in this area. Protecting the area as a strategic industrial location will mean there should be no net losses of jobs or businesses. OPDC is putting additional legal protection in place through an Article 4 direction to help safeguard business users in Park Royal. On trees, in my manifesto I committed to, quote, embark on a major tree planting programme across London in partnership with businesses and the public sector with a particular focus on schools and colleges, end quote. That was my promise to Londoners, and that is exactly what I'm delivering as Mayor, despite the 2016-17 budget I inherited from the previous Mayor, not including any funds for tree planting at all. I've made available £750,000 in my first year in office, which resulted in over 40,000 trees being planted last winter. I'm making a further £5 million available over the next 4 years to support the planting of hundreds of thousands more trees.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do appreciate your commitment to zero net job losses in Park Royal. My concern is for, I had a conversation in the plenary with Victoria Hills, Chief Executive Officer, on the 8th of March in this open session. There are 45,000 employees currently working in 2,000 businesses, high-quality businesses, many of them in manufacturing, industrial businesses. She couldn't give a specific answer into how many businesses would have to close and relocate. Since I've asked this question, have you got a figure on how many of those 2,000 businesses will have to close or relocate?
Not to hand, Chair, but I'm happy to write to the member to give them the answer. As you know, because of the mess left by the previous one, we had a review into OPDC. We now have a new chair, and she's getting a grip with the mess left by the previous mayor, but I'm happy to write to him.
That would be good. I mean, we did have an exchange on the 8th of March, so it has been about 3 months, and I haven't heard anything from her, so I would like to hear. I mean, and as for the trees, I mean, there was a 2 million tree promise in your manifesto.
No, there wasn't. There wasn't.
There wasn't. Is this sort of the manifesto that was online and is now not accessible?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay,
I've only got one manifesto.
You're not talking about 2 million trees now. You're talking about 40,000 per year. So that's and 5 million extra. So that's only going to be 200,000 or something. So that's maybe 10% of the 2 million that was around in your election pledges and campaign.
Well, I have one manifesto. I've only had one manifesto. It was a record-winning manifesto, biggest ever personal mandate of any candidate, but that's a by the by. But where we are is this. No money's in the budget last year for tree planting. I put money in of £750,000 because there was no money left by the previous mayor. We've put in £5 million to support tree planting in the capital, but also I'm trying to leverage in money from the private sector with development, public sector with schools and colleges, because we've got to make sure we increase the canopy cover in London. It's crucial.
Okay, I wish I had more time to ask you, but there we go. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Assemblymember Curtin. Let's go on to the next question about the Metropolitan Police in the name of Assemblymember McCartney.
Can I thank you for your question? First, let us remember those who were killed or injured in the recent attacks, both here in London and in Manchester. These were awful attacks committed in a barbaric manner against innocent people. The response to the attacks was exceptional, both from across the emergency services and from members of the public who rushed to assist and confront those cowardly terrorists. I fully supported the Met Police decision last year to increase the number of firearm officers who are on our streets. And by the way, they reduced nationally because of the cuts made by the Conservative government by more than 1,000. They're highly trained, well-equipped and professional. In the recent attacks in London, their bravery undoubtedly saved many lives. We need to recognise that terrorism is not just the business of counter-terrorist officers or of firearm officers. There is a continuum of work that starts with neighbourhood officers, gaining trust with communities and being the eyes and ears of the intelligence services, and all working together with communities to defeat terrorism. That's one of the reasons I've increased the number of officers dedicated to neighbourhoods to aid better prevention to stop these attacks happening in the first place. This work creates an impact on resources on all parts of the Met Police, not just their national function as counter-terrorism lead. You asked what more needs to be done to ensure the Met Police can respond to the continuing threat of terrorism. Let me give you just two things. First, there needs to be a stronger community role in coming forward and getting more information and intelligence into the police. The better the information, the better the chance the police have to stop an attack before it happens. And second, we need a proper funding settlement that recognises the challenges facing London, that the safety of London cannot be done on the cheap. The government needs to properly fund all areas of policing to keep our city safe from these cowardly attacks.
Thank you. It's that latter point I want to firstly ask you about. The government say they've protected and increased funding for counter-terrorism. We know that's a ring-fenced pot, and it cannot be used for neighbourhood policing, nor is it large enough to actually do that. Do you think the government has failed to realise what the police call the golden thread of policing, that intelligence obtained from good community policing actually feeds right up the chain of command?
Absolutely. I mean, and Craig Mackey, the Deputy Commissioner, tried yesterday in plain English to explain to Assembly members from some parts of the Assembly the continuum that you're talking about. Let me give you an example, a specific case study. On the 22nd of March this year, the terrorist attack on Westminster Bridge, the response to that the response to that terrorist attack, two-thirds of the response, came from outside Westminster. And so that is an example, and it's not dissimilar, it's more in London Bridge, by the way. So the idea that, inverted commas, ring-fencing counter-terror funding is enough is ridiculous. It's all linked. Not just the Bobby on the beat, the neighbourhood intelligence you get, the prevention stuff, the advice, but also responding to a terrorist attack. And I'm surprised. Maybe it's political reasons, maybe it's deliberate mishearing, not understanding, that Assembly members and the government don't understand that.
Thank you. My second question is about the attack at Finsbury Park. This past weekend, I, like you and no doubt many Assembly members, attended the great get-together events across London in memory of Joe Cox MP, who was killed by a far-right terrorist. And the appalling attack at Finsbury Park Mosque was again, it seems, from a far-right terrorist. You rightly stated that terrorism is terrorism. What more do you think needs to be done to ensure that all communities, not just the Muslim community, report their concerns about extremist language to the police?
I think it's really important. We've got to recognise that nobody's against people having discourse and discussion. But when that extends to inciting hatred, whatever your poisonous ideology is, we've got to stamp that out. And I've talked a lot about the importance of resilience communities, making sure our youngsters understand what it means to be a proud Brit, a proud Londoner. So when somebody comes along, whatever the ideology is, to try and turn you against your neighbours, you reject it because you know your community better. So, for example, if somebody's coming along with a perverse Islamist ideology and poison, you say, you know what, that's not my Islam. There's no conspiracy against us. Non-Muslims don't hate us. Similarly, if it's right-wing or racist or extreme right-wing, somebody coming along and saying this country's not the same as it used to be, non-whites don't like us, all the rest of it and stuff, you can say, hold on a sec, what are you talking about? That's not my experience. We've got to give our youngsters the confidence, but you know what, it can't be just a problem for one community. All of us have got to get involved in this. Parents, big brother, big sister, uncle, auntie, teachers, youth leaders, politicians, the police of course have a role, faith community, civic society, because we've got to recognise there's a reason why terrorists attack us. There's a reason why they want to harm us, because they hate the fact we're pluralistic, we celebrate, embrace, respect each other, and we get on.
Thank you.
Yes, Assembly Member Duval.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Mayor, in the areas of prevent, the pre-criminal activity by the state in both, looking at extremists from the Islamic community, but also neo-Nazis, do you think we need to change any aspect of that, or are there other issues? And what's your current views on that and your thinking around that?
Well, firstly, can I say, I think there is a role for prevent. So there are some people who are sort of saying there should be no prevent at all. I see it as safeguarding. I think, of course, there's a role. Could we do it better? Yeah, definitely. There is a whole issue about, inverted commas, branding. The word prevent has become toxic in some communities. That can't be right. Actually, a lot of the work Prevent and Channel do is around the far right, around third to a quarter. The number of attacks thwarted from the far right is not insignificant as well. But you're right, we've got to improve it. And so, personally, I look at it as safeguarding, making sure communities are involved in the strategy. In the police and crime plan, we did talk about the importance of updating Prevent, safeguarding, to make sure we involve communities, and I've offered to help the government. You'll be where the Prime Minister announced a plan to have a statutory body dealing with counter-extremism. I welcome that, and I think we've got a role to play.
Okay, and you'll be making efforts to influence that. Okay, can we move on to the more difficult area? I think about encryption, in terms of some of the lessons that we've learned around the Police and Crime Committee yesterday learned about how we're dealing with the issues around hate and those seeking materials to prepare for acts of terrorism on social media. But the real issue about end-to-end encryption, it's a difficult area because, if you allow access, if the state can do it, then others who want to do other things will get into it eventually. What's your current views on that? And do you think in terms of the current attacks that we're having, that it's worth reviewing and reviving, given that technology is advancing faster than legislation? That's what we were told yesterday. What's your views?
Well, I think, of course, just like terrorists, the bad guys are evolved in finding new ways to damage and harm us, we've got to evolve and find new ways to keep us safe. I think we've got to be a bit careful thinking any one thing is a silver bullet. All the evidence I have of the successful attacks in London and Manchester, I'm not sure how the police or authorities being able to have a back door into encrypted messaging would have prevented those, for the simple reason they weren't people who are subjects of very high importance under surveillance, is the honest answer. But actually we've got to recognise, if you allow a back door into encryption, it affects digital society from banking and finance to any of you in a WhatsApp group. And so, and the bad guys will evolve and find new ways. But I think there are technological innovations we can do. So, for example, why isn't it possible for those who have platforms, whether it's, just to name the obvious one, Facebook, Google, to have artificial intelligence to spot people who are preaching hatred and pull them down straight away? Why does it need there to be human beings keeping an eye on that and then reporting it? Why are they so slow to respond to Twitter when it comes to hate crime on there? You'll be aware, I was criticised by some people for setting up the country's first online crime hub. Well, that's important because an online crime hub is sometimes a place where people start the early stages, which can lead to serious criminality in relation to terrorism and stuff. So it's really important we evolve and discuss what we can do to make sure we're safe. But when you speak to and you read the article Mark Riley wrote in the Times, I highly commend it. Mark Riley is basically saying, with finite resources, they've got to prioritise.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question is on safer neighbourhood teams, and your question is from Assembly Member Pigeon.
Well, I know your time is short, so can I just say that PCOs are really important to policing in London. There's been a reduction from 4,600 to over 1,500. In my police and crime plan, I have no strategic target, but I do say that I want to have in each ward 2 police officers and 1 CSO. We've currently got every ward in London has their CSO. Most of the wards have their 2 dedicated officers, 109 to follow by the end of 2017. But I know your time is short, so I'll let you answer questions. But I can send you the longer answer if that
Lovely.
helps.
Thank you. I would like to see a strategic target for PCSOs alongside your one for police officers. Do you agree that PCSOs play a vital role in public engagement and intelligence gathering?
They're fantastic. They reassure victims of crime and ASB, such behaviour. They deliver crime prevention projects. They work with officer colleagues in tackling local priorities. But, just on observation, which is one of the easiest ways to save money, bearing in mind the protection police constables have, legal protection, is to reduce police staff and PCSOs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already highlighted PCSOs have fallen dramatically in terms of numbers in London. Boroughs even like Westminster only have 35, a 90% drop since 2010. But actually under your watch, Mr Mayor, in the last year we've seen the number of PCSOs fall by 10%. So 163 fewer PCSOs. If that decrease continues in the borough policing, you will not be able to meet your commitment in your police and crime plan for at least one PCSO per ward. So what I'm wondering is, will you consider bringing forward the recruitment of additional PCSOs so you can meet your pledge?
So at the moment we don't need to, because at the moment there are, you're right to raise the concern, by the way, I'm not criticising raising the concern. At the moment there are 779 PCSOs in boroughs, 779. My commitment is to 629.
Yeah.
So we're not recruiting any more, because it's a horrible word to use for human beings, but natural wastage means that we can go down but if it be the case, we were to go below 629 for boroughs, of course we would. But don't forget we've got also PCSOs that are funded by TfL and Heathrow as well.
But TfL, we wouldn't want those subsidising
Exactly
the
right.
wards,
Exactly
but
right. But
they
right.
wouldn't fund that. But looking at the drop-off in the last year, you could potentially miss that target. So I'm wondering whether you might consider recruiting some additional PCSOs.
If it's the case that I can't meet my promise to have a PCSO in every ward with the 2 police officers, of course we'll revisit that.
Fantastic. And obviously, I realise this is dependent on budget, and we've had that sort of discussion, debate,
Takes 2 to discuss.
This morning. And I obviously absolutely with you in terms of government funding. I think most of us around this chamber are. But what I'm wondering is, in next year's budget, would you be prepared to ask Londoners to pay further council tax to boost the number of PCSOs and police officers on our streets?
Well, I'm always happy to receive representation. You'll be where I was criticised from some people for increasing the police precinct to 1.99%, which is what the government told me to do, recommended I do, to avoid further penalties in future years. Always happy to receive representations if you want to make them.
But is that something that you may well consider? Because you've said quite rightly earlier, your priority is keeping Londoners safe. You're concerned about that. So will you therefore think whether you may have to increase council tax to pay for more officers on our streets?
I think the right time for me to set my budget is during the time when I set my budget. But of course, you've heard me loud and clear about safety being a priority for me, but also recognising that actually Londoners need to meet the cost of living in London and can't afford to pay too much tax. So I'll balance those two competing interests, of course.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Very helpful. Thank you.
Well timed, Assembly Member Pigeon. Next question is from Assembly Member Boff.
Thank you for your question. Dame Margaret's review shone a light on the previous administration's poor practice and disregard for taxpayers' money in pursuing and supporting the Garden Bridge project. My priority is to take action to address those failings. I've already appointed a new, stronger and more diverse TfL board, and TfL has responded to the review's findings. And I've made clear I do not intend to provide the guarantees the previous mayor had in principle approved. To do so would have exposed the taxpayer to an unacceptable level of financial risk. As you'd expect, the process of compiling the report was detailed and thorough. A GLA officer who had not previously been involved in the project supported Dame Margaret Hodge with research, interviews, admin matters, fact-checking and carrying out legal due diligence on the report and in preparing it for publication. There is therefore a significant volume of correspondence, much of it administrative in nature, but also some of it involving legally privileged advice. The advice from GLA Information Governance is that they do not believe there is merit in officers spending what would be a significant amount of time and also public money sifting through this correspondence to remove legally privileged information, personal data, or information otherwise exempt from disclosure under FOI and environmental information regulations. I should add that Dame Margaret spent 5 years as chair of the Public Accounts Committee scrutinising public spending and has earned widespread respect from all sides of the political spectrum, holding leading public figures to account. She produced and published a full, thorough and independent report. This openness stands in stark contrast to the approach of the previous administration in respect of the Garden Bridge project, as was made clear in the Hodge report. Furthermore, significant correspondence about the project itself, which is of course and legitimately of interest to the public, has been published in response to numerous FOI requests.
Mr. Mayor, will you publish the audio files and written transcripts?
That's a question of officials. It's not a decision made by me.
You commissioned the report, Mr. Mayor. Will you publish the transcripts and the audio files?
I'll follow the advice I'm given, which is that the clear advice from GLA Information Governance, and whatever advice they give me in relation to requests made.
Mr. Mayor, this is about the audio files going towards production of the report.
I'll release all the information that the officers advise should be released once FOI requests are made.
When did Margaret Hodge request payment for this work?
I'm not sure if she requested payment. £9,500 was paid to Dame Margaret for conducting her review into the Garden Bridge. This reflects the significant amount of work involved in the review and is keeping with the level of payment made to authors of other major reviews I've commissioned, including the Harris Review.
Did you ask for her to use parliamentary resources in order to complete the report?
No.
Did you provide an office at the GLA for her to do the work for this report?
That's an issue for officers. One GLA officer worked on a part-time basis to support Dame Margaret. The issue of where she worked and stuff is an issue for the GLA officers and Margaret.
Do you count Margaret Hodge as a friend of yours, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, she's one of, yep.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Let's... Are they up to time? Okay. So let's go now. We skip all of the Conservative group questions because they're out of time. And we now go to a question from Assemblymember Duval, vetting of London Underground employees.
Thank you, Chair. One of the lessons learned around... Oh, sorry, you've had advance notice. I apologise. You're going to answer.
Fine. I'll keep it short because your questions, but just in relation to the specific question. Cameron Butt worked for London Underground for under 6 months in 2016 as a trainee customer services assistant at Canada Water, Southwark and Westminster stations. He was employed in May 2016 and ceased being a TfL employee in October last year. I'm informed that he failed his probation because of extremely poor attendance. All potential employees undertake a comprehensive check before they start work with TfL. This includes criminal record checks, which would disclose any unspent criminal convictions. Screening is also carried out on a candidate's employment history, requiring a candidate to provide references for a period of 3 years. No employee is permitted to start work without the return of their screening checks, nor if any information received gives cause for concern. I need to make clear that TfL doesn't have access to any watch lists maintained by the UK authorities and the government, but it's obviously in contact with BTP, who are fully linked in with Metropolitan Police on all matters regarding security on TfL's network. I should add also, which will reassure you, I hope, that following London Bridge attacks, that Commissioner Mike Brown met with the Met Police Commissioner Cressida Dick, where they discussed vetting procedures, and TfL is subsequently carrying out a review of its vetting process and will, of course, act on any findings.
Mr. Mayor, could you also check and investigate further whether this group of employees that Mr. Butt was the cohort that Mr. Butt was employed along with, that there was a sense of urgency to bypass the vetting procedures? I know your briefing notes say that, but could you ask officers to further clarify whether it was the case that this cohort of people were fast-tracked into the system of TfL to work in this position? And then secondly, the fact that, and I think it is common knowledge, that Mr. Butt did come into contact with the police and MI5 in 2015, there clearly is a gap in our current vetting proposals if that didn't come to their attention. Now, it seems to me that we've got a history of vetting from way back from the Irish Troubles from the 70s onwards, of where people that may have come to the attention of the police and the police and intelligence agencies, where there would have been some intervention, even on counter-terrorism, in terms of the recruitment of this. And I just ask if we could walk the extra step and make sure that those potential loopholes are cut off in the future.
Can I say, firstly, you're right, and you've been quite diplomatic in phrasing your question, but you're right, there was, because of the botched way the ticket office closure was handled by the previous administration, there was this rush to rectify the error. I was criticised for undertaking a review of ticket office closures, and you'll see in the progress we've made to make do the mess made by the previous mayor. But I'll ask the Commissioner to look into whether there is an issue with those cohort that you're talking about for office.
Because at the moment, in terms of some of the information I have, and I'm happy to share, and I think others have commented on, I don't believe this cohort actually went through those vetting procedures in the way that other previous people would have. And that made a potential risk. But equally, I'm not sure if the vetting procedures would have picked up whether this individual that did come to the attention of the agencies would have been on, that would have been mentioned. I just want to make sure that loophole is closed.
Can I just, Chair, through you, thank the Senator for the way he's asked the question, because no aspersions have been cast on any individuals. And he's deliberately asked the question in a sensitive way. But it's the process that he's expressing concern about, and we'll look into that. And can I thank you for asking the way you asked it, because we're not casting aspersion on anybody else. No, but bad process can lead to the ball being dropped, and we'll look into that. Secondly, in relation to the vetting you talked about, you'll be aware from questions that have been raised from around the Assembly of concerns about checks that have got to be made, DBR and others, CRB checks and others, that can lead to delays in people being able to employ. So we've got to have a system in place that ensures we get the vetting right, but not the additional bureaucracy and cumbersome nature. So that's why our commissioner, they're both our commissioners, but the Transport Commissioner has met with the Police Commissioner to discuss vetting processes, because we've got to see if there are lessons to be learned in a sensible, pragmatic way, recognising the point you're alluding to. And again, we'll look into this, but obviously you've raised an important issue. And just so you know, Mike Brown is aware of this and is dealing with this.
Thank you.
Right, now let's move to the next question, which is in the name of Assemblymember Twycross, Future for Londoners.
Thank you for your question. First, let me say I was delighted that Labour did so well in London. Jeremy Corbyn and London's Labour candidates ran a fantastic campaign. Let's be clear that Theresa May gambled and failed to gain a big win. She failed to gain even an overall majority. However, even though we still have a Conservative government, I remain committed to putting aside party differences and continue to work closely with the government to secure the best possible deal for the capital. I wrote to the Prime Minister, Secretaries of State and the new Minister for London last week, restating my commitment to work with them and set out the priorities that I want to work with them on to deliver. First, the government needs to renew its support for Crossrail 2, and I've urged both the Prime Minister and the Transport Secretary to make an early announcement on progressing Crossrail 2 with a hybrid bill in the life of this Parliament. Second, we're all extremely grateful to the Met, who worked tirelessly to keep our streets safe and respond to security threats such as the horrific terror attacks in London. I'm deeply concerned at the severe pressures on the resources available to them. They've already had to make £600 million of savings since 2010 and face another £400 million of cuts over the coming years based on current government spending plans. I've urged the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary to scrap any plans to cut the Met's funding, as cuts on this scale will make our city less safe, and also to ensure we get the funding that we need. Third, the government needs to be much bolder in tackling London's appalling air quality, and I've offered to work with the new Environment Secretary to significantly strengthen the draft air quality plan. Fourth, I want the government to progress the London devolution deal we agreed in March. I've also called on the government to provide a long-term stable fiscal base for all major cities. In London, this would allow me to look at a wider range of options to spur innovation and support growth. And finally, what is clear from the election results is that voters in London and elsewhere clearly sent a message to Theresa May and the Conservative Party rejecting their extreme hard Brexit. It's the biggest threat to jobs and growth in London. Londoners need the fullest possible access to the single market and the customs union to protect jobs and prosperity, as well as allowing businesses to have access to talent. I should add, I had a good working relationship with the previous Minister for London, Gavin Barwell, and I hope this will continue with the new Minister for London, Greg Hands.
Thank you, and I'm pleased to hear of the fact that you've managed to raise so much with ministers in the short time since the election, particularly given events of the past couple of weeks which could reasonably have been expected to distract you, and I'm pleased that this isn't the case. I just wondered whether you would agree with the Evening Standard's headline of yesterday that we now have a Prime Minister stripped of her power, and I wondered what difference you thought a weak Conservative government would make to Londoners.
Far be it for me to get involved in internal family strife between the Standard and Theresa May. But, you know, I think the reality is, I'm not sure we had a stronger stable government before, but we've certainly not got one now. That's bad news for us in relation to negotiations with the EU. If you just do a simple compare and contrast, if the Prime Minister can't do a deal with 10 members of Parliament from the DUP, who appear, according to reports we see in the media, have her over a barrel, what progress are we going to make with 27 countries when it comes to negotiating with the European Union? And also, you bear in mind some of the plans the Conservative Party had in relation to police funding formula of schools, of policing, the idea of grammar schools at a time when there are real issues of inequalities in London, plans in relation to social care, plans in relation to the dementia tax, plans in relation to other things that affect our communities in London. The fact that she's been stripped back may not be a bad thing for those who will be in the receiving end of these government policies, but the problem is it's in nobody's interest to have a government who isn't able to get business through Parliament.
Thank you. And do you agree that your campaign, London is Open, will be more important than ever in that context?
It's crucial. I mean, we've been through, everyone's mentioned this, we've been through a terrible period, and it's been tragic for the families affected, for Grenfell Tower, the terrorist attacks in Westminster Bridge, London Bridge, Finsbury Park. But we've got to make sure we come out of this as strong, if not stronger, afterwards. We can't allow perception to be created. The Brexit vote combined with what's happened in the last few weeks to give an impression we're not going to carry on being open-minded, outward-looking, not just tolerant but respectful, celebratory of other cultures and other people. And the good news is, I launched London Tech Week last week. The buzz at London Tech Week was amazing. Innovators, entrepreneurs, startups from around the world coming to London for London Tech Week. We've got a great summer of events taking place, cultural, sporting, and so I'm hoping that London is Open will be seeing the evidence of London over this summer.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And the next question is from Assembly Member Cooper, flooding in London.
Thank you for your question. I am concerned about Thames Water's maintenance of its assets and the intolerable impact these burst water incidents have had on the lives of Londoners and the capital's businesses. I'm aware the Environment Committee held Thames Water to task on this matter just last week, as did my Deputy Mayor for Environment on the 16th of June. For years, London has put up with an unacceptable number of leaks from water mains, and I expect Thames Water to act on the recommendations from the Cuttle report as soon as possible. Just last week, Thames Water was fined the maximum amount by Ofwat, £8.55 million, for significantly missing their leakage reduction target. This shows that Thames Water have a lot of work to do to ensure they're meeting Londoners' needs. The report highlighted that the rate of water mains replacement by Thames Water is not keeping pace with the deterioration of the network. As our city grows, the water network must also keep pace, and Thames Water needs to invest in securing a reliable network for now and the future. Thames Water has informed me they'll invest an additional £97 million over the next 3 years in the mains network. Whilst this is to come from shareholders rather than customers, the amount is pitiful, given the cost of disruption to Londoners. Early detection and intervention from Thames Water is vital to reduce the risk of further bursts. I want Thames Water to increase the investment to accelerate their monitoring systems so the risk is reduced. They need to stop relying, frankly, on old listening devices and move to more advanced leak detection systems. They also must improve their compensation offer. I'd expect Thames Water to be reaching out to those affected rather than waiting for those affected to inquire, as is often currently the case. I've also been in touch with the chair of Ofwat, and my Deputy Mayor for Environment will be meeting him soon.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Mayor, for that response and for being so vocal, both yourself and your Deputy Mayor, in support for the investigation into Thames Water and their failings following several floods in London towards the end of last year. And obviously this comes in a very difficult period for London and yourself. And just before I move on to ask you a supplementary, can I just extend some personal comments that have come to me from a lot of people around Tooting and Wandsworth in general, saying, obviously in the period of Ramadan, they're very aware that you and your team have been working extremely hard, and they hope you're looking after yourself, is essentially what a lot of people have been saying. So some personal messages of support for you. I asked some of the boroughs who'd been affected by the flooding incidents, Lambeth, Lewisham, Hackney and Islington, to come into City Hall. And so we heard from a number of scrutiny inquiry teams who've been looking into these matters in detail, and we heard directly from them about some of the communication failures that you just referred to, and some of the somewhat ineffective emergency responses and a lack of aftercare for the residents. Now, one of the points that Thames Water have then made to us is that they themselves are not a blue light service, and obviously they need to liaise with the fire brigade, who don't have the end-to-end responsibility, because there is that interface. They also don't have that statutory responsibility. Would you agree that in order to deal effectively with this type of large-scale flooding that we've seen in various parts of London, that the fire service should hold the statutory duty of first responder? And if you do agree with that, what resources would be needed in terms of equipment and training, and would be this something that you would be joining with Assembly Member Twycross to press government on?
Can I say, I looked at the chair of LFIPA for assistance, but I mean, it's one of the things I want to raise with LFIPA and with Danny Cosson, the Commissioner. But can I just say this? Let's not allow Thames Water to get away with just the issue of first response, because how you plan to do the works matters as well. So there's planned works that go wrong and cause all sorts of disruption. We're trying to work with them to improve their planning. But it's not simply the response to the crisis caused by the flooding, but also how they deal with customers and businesses. But I'm happy to look into the issues you raised about first response. Maybe there may be need for legislation, so I'll need to check that with the chair of LFIPA, but also there's also an issue of resources as well. But can I take this offline and speak to you about that once I've discussed this with the chair of LFIPA and the commissioner as well?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next question is regarding knife crime, and it's from Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you for your question. There have been too many instances of knife crime recently across our city. Knife crime has been on the increase over the last 2 years, both in London and nationally. This is absolutely unacceptable and has to stop. I've prioritised the knife crime strategy as our first piece of delivery work following the police and crime plan, and this will be launched shortly. Knife crime in London is a complex problem that needs to be solved on many levels. It can't just be seen as a policing issue. We have to deal with the causes and recognise the symptoms. Throughout the consultation, the clear message is for better early intervention, working with families, working with schools and working with communities. This is not something the police can do alone. We've not been standing still. My office has been working with the MPS to ensure there is an increased operational response to knife crime to tackle the immediate challenges. To date, Operation Skepta, which you know all about, has engaged in over 7,000 weapon sweeps with over 1,500 weapons recovered and removed from the streets of London. Operation Skepta 9 will run during this week with a focus on enforcement. The last phase, Skepta 8, which ran in May, involved 1,895 activities across London, resulting in more than 500 arrests and 380 knives seized. This is the highest level of activity conducted as part of this operation to date and will set a benchmark for future. Since May 2016, since I became the Mayor, a total of 2,709 individuals have been charged with possession of a knife. The new knife crime strategy has an immediate comprehensive response to tackle those who carry knives and those who are responsible for the violence which we're seeing on our streets. This includes a renewed focus on targeted police operations. And you'll be pleased to know Operation Skepta will now run on a monthly basis. The MPS is also deploying 80 officers, both in uniform and plain clothing, into high knife crime borough hotspots, including super recognisers to identify key offenders. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for that answer, Mr. Mayor. As you said, this is a complex issue and there are no easy answers. For me, it's about the 3 E's: education, enforcement, and engagement. Engagement with and intervention in communities. On the education side, knife possession in schools went up by some 50% in 2016 compared to 2014, some 299 incidents. What do you see the role of schools and families in your strategy?
Can I say, I know you know this, but for the audience of doubt, the vast majority of young people are fantastic. Peaceful, law-abiding, don't get into trouble. So we're talking about a small number of people. One of the reasons why I was keen to have school safety officers is to make sure we can work with the schools in relation to make sure the message is said loud and clear. If you carry a knife, you're going to be less safe, not more safe. You don't get respect. You will be arrested and action will be taken against you. Don't do it. All of us have a role to play there. Some schools are reluctant to come forward to have the school safety officer. They would have been stigmatised. We've got to work with them to make sure all schools recognise this is a problem for all of us. And so we've got to make sure the education role you talk about is at the centre of our strategy.
I'll leave it at the Chair.
Thank you. Yes. Assembly Member Whittle. No, sorry, no, I'm jumping. Assembly Member Russell's question is on small businesses threatened by regeneration projects.
Thank you. I'll cut this short for obvious reasons.
Thank you.
I'm developing a number of policies and strategies to look at the balance for the need for new homes to tackle the housing crisis with the need to protect and provide vital employment space. So you'll be pleased that I'll be setting out policies in the new London plan, which seek to ensure we have a supply of workspace that meets the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises as well as large employers, including the availability of low-cost business space. You'll be aware of the rapid loss of industrial land in recent years as a particular cause for concern. In response, we're looking at how we can strengthen protection for industrial activities throughout London, including re-provision of similar spaces when sites are redeveloped. We're also looking at innovative solutions such as industrial intensification and co-located industrial uses with other uses. I'm working with the London boroughs in relation to Article 4 directions to protect these areas, and also the new London Economic Action Partnership is looking at good growth fund to help small businesses in towns and centres. There's much more right to it.
Thank you. I actually want to talk specifically about Earl's Court. Last week I met owners of local hotels and restaurants that used to serve visitors to the exhibition centre before it closed down. They're really struggling now. And it seems that the Earl's Court master plan failed to account for that heavily intertwined nature of the local economy with those hotels and restaurants that were completely dependent on trade from visitors to the exhibition centre. And it used to represent sort of like 30% of exhibition space available in London. You know, there were a lot of visitors there. So will you propose a new policy in the London plan that ensures that the needs of existing businesses are accounted for in new developments to stop this happening again?
So in relation to Earl's Court, you'll be right. Because it was decided by the previous mayor, unless there's an application to change the master plan or application, I can't get involved, but you're right to remind us of the consequences of that decision made by Boris Johnson and the then council. I'm happy to listen to the representations you've made, but what I suggest is if I get Jules, the Deputy Mayor, to speak to you, we'll see if we can take
that would be absolutely fantastic. The local businesses and campaigners are launching a report here on Monday evening. If it's possible for your Deputy Mayor to come to that launch, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Give me yours after, Jules.
Do that, certainly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question from Assembly Member Shaw, MPS Digital Investigation Unit.
Tackling child sexual abuse and exploitation is a hugely important and demanding area of work. Sexual exploitation can have a profound impact on a young person's life. And we all have a responsibility to make sure that when a young victim comes to the attention of the authorities, they're given the best possible chance of achieving justice and rebuilding their lives. In my police and crime plan, I've made sure victims are at the heart of everything we do. You'll be aware I've announced a new Victims Commissioner, London's first, Claire Waxman. There are a number of policies in my plan, which include, for example, invested in extended and joined-up commission of services for young victims of sexual violence, along with NHS England and other London partners. MOPAC and NHS England commissioned an assessment of the level of sexual violence in London and the scale of the need for support services in order to inform our future work. The MPS Digital Cyber and Communications Forensic Unit, which you referred to, allude to in your question, completed 53,000 examinations last year, a large proportion of which relate to child sexual exploitation. This was 8% more than the previous year, which together with an exceptional increase in the data held in devices places real pressure on the unit. 70% of telephone examinations are completed in 10 days. Non-urgent computer examinations are completed in 3 months, with an effective prioritisation process in place to fast-track urgent cases. A key part of how well the MPS perform is the introduction of innovative kiosk approach, which enable frontline officers to examine phones at the point of seizure. The real challenge facing the Met is not enough resources in the face of demand. With the policing stretched, my concern is that we don't have the resources we need to provide the best police service we can. I must repeat again, I will continue to lobby the government to ensure London is properly funded in the years ahead, and look to you, Navin, and all Assembly members to come together and support me in doing so.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, your lobbying for better resources for London in this aspect is commendable, and you have our support. What I do want to raise is the issue about the progress, and that's what progress has been made in protecting children and young people since HMIC's National Child Protection Inspection, which was in 2016. Firstly,
the report was shocking. And so since the report was published, an oversight group chaired by the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime has been established. Its remit is to ensure an appropriate and effective Met response to HMIC recommendations. Group members include key officials from the Met Police, but also, and it's really important, also the National Police Chiefs Council, London Safeguarding Children's Board, the Office of Children's Commissioner, and the College of Policing. Extensive work's been carried out, and an area of work that's also been a central feature in the meetings between the Deputy Mayor and the Commissioner has been the area around the issues raised by HMIC report. HMIC will re-inspect the force in 2017, and we all want to make sure that when they inspect then, they've seen evidence of a vast improvement.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time. I have a couple of questions, but I'll write to you about those, because there are some serious ongoing concerns. But thank you for your answer.
Thank you. A question from Assembly Member Whittle. London, the world's leading financial centre, and UKIP has 2 minutes on this.
The short answer is that one of the reasons why we are is because we're access to single market, members of the EU. We've got to make sure, even though we're leaving the EU, we don't stop being the great global city we are. I'll let you ask another question because I don't want to use up your time.
Thank you. I mean, we are at a gallop, aren't we? The thing is that we are still top, Mr. Mayor. I just wondered, I take that as a yes, you do join me in congratulating London. Do you know what the other 9 have in common with us? The other cities?
They're global cities like we are. New York,
yes,
Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo.
So they're none of them in the EU. The thing is that...
That's because they're not in Europe, Peter. I mean, God, they're not... Can someone give them a geography lesson afterwards?
Even more. They're not in the EU.
Nice one.
The thing is that for a long time, will you admit that a lot of it was scaremongering, that in fact you were saying that basically the city faced possible disaster of people going to Europe and all the rest of it. This has been one of the arguments all the way along from people such as yourself who campaigned to remain in the EU. Do you accept that that's now not going to happen?
Chair, can I just tell the Assembly member some news? We have not left the EU yet.
It was said actually by people who campaigned that in fact there would be an immediate recession. It was said there'd be an immediate recession. Well, we haven't had that. We've had nothing but quite good financial news.
To be fair, he's now the editor of the Standard. But look, I can introduce him to people in banks across London, from UBS to Morgan Stanley and others, who are actually moving jobs out of London. One of the reasons why we've seen people coming to London is because of our ability to attract talent. If we leave the EU, that'll make it more difficult.
We are leaving, Mr. Mayor. I hate to break it to you, but we are leaving. And the fact is you need to absolutely speak up the City of London, not just bring it down.
Okay, Peter. Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you. Assembly Member Dismore has a question to you on London's economy.
Can I thank you for your question? One of the jobs I do as the Mayor is to talk up London as being the greatest city in the world. We are a global city, the only global city in Europe. One of the reasons why we are a global city is because of our ability to attract talent from not just the 27 nations across the EU, but all across the world. And what beggars belief is people talk down our ability to be a partner, equal partner, to 27 countries. For some reason, they think we cower to other countries in the EU because they don't understand what a fantastic nation we are. One of the things I will do as the Mayor of London is make sure we remain open. Access to a single market is crucial, but also making sure the government recognises they've got to stop being so control-freakery. They need to devolve more powers to London. A good London means a good UK. We contribute hugely to revenues to our country, but also job creation across the country. There's a symbiotic relationship with London being the capital city. I look forward to working with Assembly members, even those who naively think an extreme hard Brexit benefits London, as well as others.
Now, would you agree that when we contrast the £3,070 per head that London subsidises the rest of the country from our taxes, and when, to use a random example, government spending exceeds tax income by £5,440 per head in Northern Ireland, a figure which will rise by yet another £1,000 a head as the price the rest of us have to pay as the Conservatives deal with the DUP, want £2 billion more to keep Theresa May in office, but clearly not in power. Would you agree it's vital the government doesn't kill off the rest of the country's golden goose, our economy here in London, in their persistence with their hard Brexit negotiating position on the rights of our fellow Londoner EU nationals and the migrant talent on which we depend, on the single market and customs union, and on passporting rights? And are you also concerned about the wall of silence from the government over Crossrail 2, which wasn't in the Conservative manifesto nor in the Queen's speech? And are you also concerned that despite a disingenuous fake news press release story from the Home Office about the Met's funding, yesterday in the Chamber, the Met Police Commissioner confirmed to the PCC committee that the Met was still facing a funding shortfall of £400 million, and that even with further efficiencies, including closing more police stations, without extra government funding, cuts in the number of police officers are inevitable.
Can I say this? The Conservative Party can no longer claim ever to be the party of law and order. The evidence we've seen over the last 7 years with the lack of investment in our police services is frankly disgraceful. I will not apologise for speaking up for London. And I hope all Assembly members would speak up for London in our campaign to get the funding we need as an international and capital city. In relation to Crossrail 2, look, Crossrail 2 benefits not just London, benefits the country in relation to wealth creation, in relation to jobs, in relation to improved transport links outside of London into London. That's why councils outside of London support Crossrail 2 and politicians support Crossrail 2. By the way, if you're going to have a high-speed train coming into London, a HS2, any journeys times made up in the speed are lost by the disruption caused at Euston. Euston, Victoria, Waterloo have to close down because of overcrowding. So it's in the country's interest to invest in Crossrail 2, and I hope the government supports our plan. By the way, we're contributing 49% of the funding for Crossrail 2. You tell me which other city contributes half, almost half the costing of a major infrastructure project. In relation to the country needing London to do well, what surprises me is people who talk about an extreme hard Brexit outside of London don't recognise that London's ability to contribute to our nation's prosperity, and I believe in the nation state, by the way, is because we have access to talent, we're members, we're access to a single market, members of a customs union. If you think we'll continue to be able to be as prosperous and successful outside of the single market and customs union, think again. And it's in all of our interest to recognise that the difference it makes having access to a single market, the ability to attract talent, and also being members of the customs union. And I'm hoping the government recognises the verdict of the British public at the general election and avoids an extreme hard Brexit, but recognises there is a sensible course. Yes, we are leaving the EU, but there's a way of leaving the EU without causing us maximum damage. Thank you.
Okay, all right. It's just past 12:30. I want to thank you, Mayor, for your answers, and regret you have to leave us, but we understand you have to attend a memorial service, so thank you.
Thank you.
Now let's go to part B. Oh, and just say the questions not asked, everyone will receive their written responses by Tuesday, 27th June. Okay, part B, I would ask the Assembly to agree the motion set out on the agenda in my name, which is that the Assembly notes the answers, or in brackets or not, close brackets, to the questions asked. Item 6, action taken by the Chair under delegated authority. Can I ask that the recommendations in the report are agreed? Agreed. Item 7, as a change of date of the February 2018 meeting, can I ask that the recommendation to reschedule the meeting of the London Assembly meeting on 19th February 2018 to 22nd February 2018 be agreed? Agreed. Item 8, future plenary meetings. Can I ask that the recommendations are set out on the agenda paper proposing topics for future Assembly plenary meetings is agreed? Can members put on their button when they're speaking, please? Thank you. Agreed. Date of next meeting. The next scheduled meeting of the London Assembly will be the London Assembly plenary, which will take place at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, 28th June, and I haven't finished any other business. Item 10. Can I ask that the recommendations in the report are agreed? This is changes to committee membership. They are as shown. Yes? Agreed? Yeah. And can I just remind members now that there will be a private and confidential briefing for them in room 5 at 1 o'clock, and that lunch is provided, and I shall see you down there. Thank you.
GLA